Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was the son of Ainz Ooal? Part 1. MHA x Overlord. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is El Principe Hechicero by Ranger 1863. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. In a huge city made up of houses of various designs and colors, as well as some shops, you could see swords, bows, crossbows, and all kinds of antique weapons on display. The city was very alive. Thousands of inhabitants walked through the streets, all heading in a specific direction. Despite the city's appearance, its inhabitants were not what you would expect in the middle of a city that could seemingly be found in the middle of the Middle Ages. Among the beings walking through the streets were some humans, elves with dark skin, giants measuring d-meters, humans with animal ears and tails, what appear to be humanoid animals with characteristics of lizards, wolves, rats, bears, and all kinds of species that only exist in legends and human imagination, all walking together as if it were the most normal thing in the world, all together in the same direction. All the beings that walked through the city went to the same place. All the different species crowded outside the colossal doors of the palace, all waiting patiently until the doors opened, allowing people to enter inside. Upon entering the palace, people could see the beautiful flowers and plants that decorated the main garden. In front of the palace gates, hundreds of guards of different races dressed in golden armor stood, protecting the entrance. The civilians stood outside the castle. A loud commotion could be heard from the place, everyone waiting patiently. After all, everyone had gathered here for this moment. Some had even come from cities all over the kingdom just to be present on this day. Inside the palace, several beings of different shapes gathered around a door. These beings were two dark-skinned elves, both with a similar appearance, apparently twins who were between 18 and 21 years old. A kind of insect that seemed to be a mix between an ant and a mantis. With a humanoid shape with hard and cyan skin, appearing to be armor. It had 4 arms and a tail that seemed to be longer than the height of this being. The next was a being with the appearance of a human with tanned skin. He wore an elegant orange suit with white stripes and glasses that did not allow his eyes to be seen. From his back a metallic tail with spikes sprouted from his back and swung from one side to the other slowly. The next was a white-skinned girl wearing an elegant purple suit, with 2 blood-red eyes, white hair and 2 sharp teeth under her mouth. The next was a woman with 2 colored hair, one side black and the other white, with white skin and eyes. Heterochromatic. To one side of them a being that could only be represented as the representation of death itself sat with his face covered by his skeletal fingers, a human skeleton, whose bones looked like ivory, dressed in a black academic gown and with 10 beautiful rings adorning each of his fingers. He stood in a position that expressed deep thought, while at his side the other creatures conversed without interrupting the Shinigami's thoughts. While watching the representation of death, the tanned-skinned being in British attire started a conversation with his companions. One, I wonder what Ainz-sama is thinking. Onehe paused briefly in his tirade to adjust his glasses. One, what I would give to be able to reach just the tip of your immense wisdom and understand just a fraction of the plans you must already have for this child. One, the man said with a calculating smile full of emotion that would make any outside observer bristle. Hearing that, the young elf girl dressed in a white robe and dragon-scale shirt spoke. One, I can't believe Albedo has another descendant of Ainz-sama. I thought I would be next. The dark elf said with a bit of jealousy in her voice. One, it was definitely unexpected. One, it was the insectoid's response to the young elf's words. After Kokaida's words, the little white-haired girl, dressed in an elegant purple dress, spoke angrily while biting her finger. One, that woman, I can't believe she has another child with Ainz-sama, Onehe said with a voice that varied between jealousy and anger. The demon ignored the jealous comment of his vampire companion and continued with his words, this time directing the attention of those present towards his master. One, look at Ainz-sama, meditating, thinking about the future of that child. I would like to know what he thinks. One, the man said almost as if he were in some kind of religious ecstasy. While his guardians were talking, the undead in the room was thinking about the current situation he was in. One, One mentally worried scream. One, not again. I had already promised myself that I would only have one more with Aura and that would be the last. I shouldn't have accepted when Albedo came into my room and asked me to adopt a living form, but this time I swear, I won't have another child. I won't let those women dominate me again. I'm so sorry Orwan. He mentally apologized to his third wife after his personal promise. One, besides the fact that all three are unbearable during pregnancy. One, he commented to himself, remembering what it was like to deal with his pregnant wives and not intending to go through that again. One, I can only hope to do better with this one than with the other three. I can barely spend time with them due to my responsibilities, but this time I will make sure to be a better father. I still have to talk to Shaltir, Zeshi and Albedo. One, he let out a mental sigh as he remembered that little matter. Onim, not sure their personalities are the best suited for raising children. Onahe thought as he remembered the way his wives were. A few minutes passed in the current situation, when the door opened, from which a woman with a dog's head and a maid's outfit came out to inform her master and her guards. One, Lord Ainz, you were born, Woofone, the woman said, ending her sentence with a bark. Ainz raised his head, ending his musings. One, did everything go well? One, that was the first thing he wanted to know. The dog-headed maid named Pestonia advancing slightly. One, that's right, he's a very healthy child. Congratulations Ainz Samawan, the servant told her, who was also one of the most powerful healers in her world. Ainz instantly stood up and walked elegantly into the room, followed by the floor guardians. Upon entering, he came across one of his 4 wives lying on the bed, holding a small bundle covered by white sheets. The skeletal ruler approached his wife and gently moved one of the sheets to clearly see his son, but in doing so, he had a brief surprise. His son looked completely different from what he expected. He was a small and fragile child. It seemed that with the slightest movement he could die. He had some characteristics of his mother. 2 horns identical to Albedo's grew out of his head, from his waist. A pair of small black wings emerged, but what truly baffled Ainz was his hair and eyes. Unlike his firstborn that he had with the succubus, who had black hair and divided yellow pupils, the newborn had dark green hair, 4 freckles on each of his cheeks and divided emerald green pupils. One, what a curious appearance. One, the last of the Supreme Being's comments to himself, intrigued by his son's appearance. Prestonia, who was standing next to the bed, decided to say something to her master. One, that's right, Ainz Sama. His son seems to have a peculiar appearance, although we don't know the reason. Woofone, I explained it to Ainz. Hearing this, the Overlord extended his hand towards the newborn and recited a simple spell. On analysis. One, instantly, all the information about her newborn son appeared in her mind. Name: none. Race: half Overlord, half succubus. Occupation: none. Level: 1. Racial levels: major hybrid. 1. Job levels: none. Titles: none. Unique talent: reflection of greed. The Supreme was surprised. He honestly didn't expect something like this. He knew that some people in the New World were born with a unique talent, which could give them great power or be something useless. After the birth of his first 3 children, he assumed that being descendants of players, they couldn't have a unique talent. He had some hopes with Zeshi, but his daughter was born without any unique talent, so he finally lost hope. But that left a new question: why did this child possess a unique talent? And was that the reason for his different characteristics? Oni, a reflection of greed. 1. The 2 flames in the Supreme's eyes shone brightly with emotion. 1. But how interesting, Onahe commented to himself. On Demiurgeon, he called one of his most trusted and intelligent subordinates. The demon in the orange suit knelt down the moment the Supreme called him. 1. Yes, Ainz Ooal, the Archdevil said as he knelt in what was considered a proper pose to obey his master's orders. The Supreme looked at him fixedly, already accustomed to the displays of loyalty that everyone gave him, and gave his order. 1. When the presentation is over, I want you to check on my son. I'd like to know what his unique talent can do. Onahe ordered the tan-skinned demon. Demiurge gave a slight nod, even on his knees, in response. 1A's ordered on. That was all he said to his master, as an indication that his order would be obeyed. The Supreme Court was pleased. 1. Well, Pestonia, please bring my other children. I would like them to meet their brother before introducing him to the kingdom. 1. The maid bowed at the Overlord words. Yes, Ainz Sama. Woof. Onahe said to leave the room. The maid took a few minutes to return, after which the door opened again and the dog-headed maid entered the room accompanied by a boy and 2 little girls. The boy was the tallest of the 3, indicating that he was the oldest. His face, horns and wings made him look very similar to the newborn, except that his hair was black, he lacked freckles and his eyes were yellow with divided pupils. The girls were tiny replicas of their mothers. 1 had white hair, red eyes, and vampire teeth, while the other had hair parted in 2, each side a different color, black and white. When the children came in, Albedo, who was still in bed, called one of them to come closer. "One Beelzebub, come closer so you can meet your little brother." Onehe asked for his firstborn. Hearing his mother, the little boy with horns and wings walked slowly towards his mother and stared at his newborn brother. "One, why does he have green hair?" Onehe asked with all the innocence a child could possess. At the question, the beautiful succubus woman displayed a maternal smile. "Because he's very special, you're now his older brother, and it's up to you to take care of him." She spoke with a kindness rarely seen in women. Hearing that, the little one started to jump up and down in excitement. "One, yes, mother, I promise you, I will take care of him," Onehe said as he looked at his newborn little brother. The woman in the dress reached out her hand to lovingly rub her son's hair. "One, I hope so," Beelzebub Onehe told his son. As the first prince looked at his newborn baby brother, he suddenly stopped as if he had just realized something. "One, by the way, what is your name?" Onehe asked everyone, drawing the attention of those present. Albedo blinked a couple of times at the question, as if she had just realized that she hadn't given her son a name. "One, I don't know yet." Onish put her finger on her chin and looked up at the sky, showing an adorable thinking pose. "One, your father hasn't told me yet," Onehe answered his son. Hearing that Ainz approached the bed and saw the newborn, thinking of a name to give him, he didn't give his other children very different names, generally based on mythologies or Western names. Maybe this time he should honor his origin and give him a more Japanese name. He stared at the little one who was sleeping, trying to think of a suitable name for him, until he finally thought of a name that would fit the little one perfectly. The silence that had fallen over the room during the Supreme's brief moment of thought was broken when he began to speak. "One, Isizuku," Onehe said, drawing the attention of those present with the peculiar name he had chosen. "One, from now on his name will be Isizuku. Ooal Gown." "One," the Supreme Court concludes. "Oni, a great name. Ainz Ooal, I praise the devil in the orange suit." Cocytus touching the tip of his axe to the ground, like a small act of celebration on the part of a warrior. That's a good name for a warrior. After saying those words he breathed cold air from his mouth. Despite her jealousy, Aura couldn't help but praise the Overlord decision. "That's an amazing name," Ainz Ooal said as she stretched her hands towards the sky, momentarily reminding Ainz of the little girl Aura had been when they came to this world, a girl who had grown up so many years ago. Mare, despite being her sister's age and having replaced her skirt with boys' clothes, still possessed the shy attitude that her creator had made her with. "One, I think that's AC cool no name," Onehe said with a bit of nervousness in his voice. The succubus watched the baby in her hands, thinking about the name her husband had given him. "One, Isizuku," Onehe said in a whisper before Smillingonates, "a wonderful name. One." After the compliments, Ainz turned to his other two daughters, who until now had kept their distance. One, Alina, the girl with white hair and vampire teeth, reacted to his clonizernion. This time the one who reacted was the other girl with her hair divided into black and white. "One, come meet your brother," Onehe asked them both. Immediately the two girls approached the bed and saw the little baby who was sleeping. "Onate's very small and cute," one said. Eleanor, the daughter Ainz had with shelter. "Onate's not that cute," one said. Serene, Zeshi's daughter, who was pouting when she said those words. "Aneha ha ha," one, the Overlord laughed at his daughter's attitude. "One, you will be able to get to know him better later. For now, it is time to introduce him to the people." One, the Supreme Court indicated. Instantly Albedo got out of bed, showing no discomfort at all for her very recent birth, and began to accompany Ainz, who was closely followed by his children and the floor guardians. After walking for a few seconds they arrived at a balcony, where everyone goes outside. Seeing the king and his guards enter the balcony, the entire gathered crowd immediately fell silent, paying full attention to the king's actions and words. After silence filled the castle gardens, Albedo slowly walked towards Ainz, handing over the still sleeping little boy. The Supreme Being carried his son with one of his arms while with the other he moved the blankets a little so that the figure of the little boy would be visible. Finally he lifted the little boy up with both hands so that everyone in the castle gardens and around him could see him. "One, this is my son, Isizuku Ooal Gown, and from today until eternity he will be one of my successors," one, the Supreme announced to his world. When Ainz finished his brief introduction, all the people in front of the castle knelt on one leg. Both the civilians and the guards who saw golden armor knelt. "One, Larga Vida in Isizuku Ooal Gown." "One," they all shouted in unison. After those words the kingdom bustled in the place, all the citizens and guards were excited, celebrating the birth of the new prince of the kingdom. This day was a day that was celebrated throughout the Sorcerer Empire, since today, the fourth son of the great Sorcerer King was born. The Overlord, who was still holding his son in his arms, began to rock him to try to keep him from waking up due to the noise of the people who had come to see him. He slowly raised the little boy until he was at the height of his skeletal face, and once there, the Sorcerer King whispered something to his newborn son. "One, I expect great things from you," Isizuku Oneihe said to the sleeping little one. Far from the Wizard Empire, in a completely different world without semi-humans, demi-humans, heteromorphs or magic, a world where only humanity exists and where it has evolved to the point that 80% of the global population has developed a superpower or mutation, which people call a quirk. With the emergence of quirks, society entered a new era, the Age of Heroes. With the appearance of quirks, a large number of people used them for their own benefit or for selfish reasons, severely damaging society. In response to this, a group of people who wanted to use their powers for good appeared, and thus a new profession was born. A profession that was believed to only exist in comics and people's imaginations, the profession of heroes. Because of this, the world's various governments created educational institutions where aspiring heroes were taught how to use their quirks responsibly, fight villains, and rescue civilians. Hero status was one of the most coveted, especially due to the high pay and the prestige and recognition that came with the profession. Currently, a common situation in this society was developing, a chase, in which a duo of villains were escaping from one of Japan's strongest heroes, the professional hero Endeavor. Endeavor was the second best hero in Japan. His quirk allows him to generate fire from any part of his body, but despite having such a powerful quirk, he remained in second place in the top of heroes, always in second place, always behind his eternal rival, Japan's #1 hero, the symbol of peace, All Might. The Flame Hero had seen the two villains selling an illicit substance to a young teenager. After he tried to arrest them and they both fled, a chase had developed that had taken them into the forest near the city of Musudafu. Usually it wouldn't be a problem for Endeavor to arrest two villains like them, but without a doubt their quirks were quite complicated to deal with. The first of them had a quirk that allowed him to teleport with his friend to anywhere within a radius of 50 meters, but it seemed that its use was tiring since he had only used it 4 times and he looked exhausted. While the second villain had a quirk that allowed him to control water, so whenever Endeavor used a ranged attack, the villain used all the water that was around him to cover himself, and due to the number of civilians Endeavor could not use his best attacks, but now that he had managed to take the chase to the forest that would no longer be a problem. The hero let out a huge call in an attempt to finally end the chase. But then one of the villains did something that Endeavor didn't expect. He apparently used his quirk to draw the liquid out of the plants around him, leaving everything around the forest completely dry, and used the liquid to protect himself from the attack, creating a smoke screen, which Endeavor tried to use to quickly approach the villains using his flames as propulsion, but just as he was about to reach them, the other villain used his quirk again, transporting both of them away from Endeavor, and in this way everything continued as before. After transporting the villains, Endeavor had lost sight of them, so now he would have to find them. While Endeavor tried to find them, both villains had hidden on the side of a mountain ravine about 80 meters high. One shit, we really are unlucky. Of all the heroes we could run into, why did it have to be Endeavor? One of the villains complained in a hushed tone, trying to avoid making any noise that would help the hero find them. The second villain was breathing heavily, clearly exhausted from the chase. "I can't believe that bastard followed us into the woods," he replied to his companion. But it seems that the forest undergrowth and my quirk caused him to lose track of us. Now we just have to wait for him to get bored of looking for us and then we'll leave," Oneihe said as he began to relax a little. "One sounds like a good plan," his partner told him before realizing something. By the way, where are we?" I asked him as he turned his head from side to side to look at his surroundings. The other villain looked at the mountain they were hiding next to and the forest that covered everything in sight. I have no idea, I've never been here before," Oneihe answered his partner. As the other villain took in his surroundings, he noticed something. On the mountainside next to them, there were some strange symbols carved in stone. "How strange, now that I realize it, the entire wall is covered in strange symbols," Oneihe commented to the other villain as he ran his hands over said symbols. His partner seemed a little irritated by his partner. One seriously. Endeavor is chasing us and you think of some weird drawings written in a riscone clearly. Symbols were the least of their concerns in that situation. The villain at his side smiling calmly at his companion's annoyance. One hey, while we wait for Endeavor to get bored of looking for us, we should pass the time with something, Onehei commented with amusement. 1OH, I don't know how to worry about that. One the villain duo looked up upon hearing that deep voice, finding the figure of the number 2 hero standing towering over them. One because at the place where I will send them they will have all the time in the world. 1HE said menacingly as his flames increased. Seeing him, the villains immediately stood up, terrified by the man in front of them. One shit. One of them exclaimed in fear. The second villain stood in front of his partner, his arms shaking due to the fear he felt. Onen found Yusonehe said fearfully. Endeavor showed a terrifying smile to the villains and now, they have no escape. Onehei said it in a way that villains weren't sure was appropriate for a hero. The hero threw a call to both of them, which the villains managed to dodge by the skin of their teeth. But then the fire hit the cliff wall. Instantly the symbols on the wall began to light up the same color as Endeavor's flames. When all the symbols were lit up by the fire, the entire mountain began to crumble, leaving only the edges of the cliff, which simulated a semicircular door 40 meters high. Then the inside of the edges that simulated the door lit up with a strange light that seemed to ripple, constantly changing colors. Surprised by this strange event, the villains were paralyzed for a few seconds looking at the enormous door that had just formed from the mountain that was previously there. Endeavor took advantage of the villains' distraction and made a call again, which the villains were able to dodge for a while by jumping to the side, but without realizing that they had jumped through the door, completely disappearing from the place. Endeavor watched both villains disappear through the door. One Shitonehe complained loudly at the disappearance of the villains, put his hand to his ear, activating his communicator. On this is Endeavor, a strange structure just appeared in Musudafu Forest. It seems to have something to do with some kind of warp quirk. The villains went through it and disappeared. I'm going to follow them. Onehei alerted the person on the other end of the line. One understood Endeavor. On the assistant on the other end of the line indicated that he had been heard. One will send someone to investigate the structure. If you really plan to follow the villains, proceed with discretion. Onehei warned him to be careful. One understood on Endeavor moving forward in the face of the man's words. After what was said, the hero of the flame ran to the structure and went through the portal. When he went through the portal, the first thing he saw was a forest. At first glance the forest would seem like the same forest as the one he was in before, but as one of the best heroes of Japan, he had greater experience. As a good hero he was able to notice the slight changes in the environment, which revealed to him that in reality he was no longer in the Musudafu forest but in a completely different one. Endeavor quickly took notice of the area. It didn't take him long to find the trail those two villains had left during their escape. He followed the trail. The villains had a head start on him, but because they didn't even try to cover their tracks, even for a hero not as versed in tracking as him, it wasn't very difficult to follow them. After running for a few minutes, Endeavor reached the end of the forest. Due to the open area he was now in, he could see both villains in the distance. The two ran towards a small village that was a few meters from their location. Upon reaching the village, both villains stopped dead in their tracks. They thought they had lost Endeavor, so they stopped to rest. One man, we were really lucky. One of the villains commented. One yes, if it weren't for that strange door, we would be lost. One the other villain answered him. One of the villains began to look around in confusion, paying special attention to the village they were in. Now that I realize, where are we? He asked his companion in confusion. Hearing that both villains began to look around, they were in the middle of a small village. The simple houses were made of wood and straw and the roads were completely made of dirt. Around them a group of people walked through the village, completely ignoring the confused villain zone. I don't remember there being a village like this near the Musudafu forests, Onehei said to his partner. Quickly the first villain walked towards one of the residents walking to the village. It was a woman who was carrying a heavy sack on her shoulders. One excuse me, ma'am. The woman stopped her chores when she realized she was being called, turning her gaze to the villain in front of her. My friend and I are lost. Could you tell us where we are? The villain asked politely, not wanting to start an unnecessary conflict with these people. The woman smiled back. They are in a small, unnamed rural town. but if they walk in that direction, one, she pointed back to the forest from which the villain had emerged, who did not understand the term the woman had used to represent her people. One, they will arrive in the city of Ishbar in 4 days. One, the woman explained to him. After her short explanation, the woman returned to her planes, leaving behind an even more confused villain. One, city of Ishbar. Where the hell is that? Onahe asked the heir in total confusion. His companion slowly approached him, having heard the woman's short explanation. One, shit, it's just as I feared. Onahe's partner turned his gaze towards him upon hearing him speak. One, that door we went through must have been caused by some kind of quirk warp, so it seems possible we're not even in Japan anymore. One, I explained to the other villain. One, shit, one, his partner said as he brought his hands to the sides of his head. One, and where the hell are we? Onahe asked, completely confused. One, I have no idea. I've never seen or heard of a place like this. One, the other villain responded discouragingly. But before they could continue talking, a call was made to their address, which was barely dodged by the villains, causing the call to hit the wall of a house. One, TSK, Endeavor's voice exclaimed irritably. The flame hero immediately launched himself at the two villains, who, not expecting him, were quickly knocked out by him before they could even get off the ground. I finally caught them, now I just have to get them back through the door and he can rest. One, the hero exclaimed with relief in his voice. But at that moment Endeavor realized something. He was completely surrounded. Dozens of men wearing armor made of what appeared to be iron and some sort of leather covering certain areas to facilitate mobility were surrounding Endeavor and pointing spears at him. The hero observed the men around him. Some of them had made of somewhat peculiar mutations. There was one that looked like a giant bipedal lizard, a humanoid rabbit, a humanoid goat. One was quite small and stocky with a long beard, in addition to someone with pale skin, completely white eyes, and instead of legs his abdomen ended in a snake tail that acted as legs. He also recognized some with a normal appearance. One, what the devilone, the hero growled, not understanding the situation. One of the men surrounding him, from the group with a normal appearance, took a slight step forward and began to speak to him. One, immediately deactivate your fire magic and surrender yourself or we will be forced to use force. One, the young man in armor warned him. Endeavor was confused by the boy's choice of words. One, magic? Onahe put that aside for the moment as he realized that these guys were trying to arrest him. One, are you trying to stop me? Do you have no idea who I am? Onahe screamed angrily. He couldn't let these nobodies talk to Japan's number 2 hero like that. The soldier seemed to ignore his outburst of anger. One, raise your hands, we'll take you to a prison for interrogation. Onahe gave him his second warning. The flame hero didn't know where he was. It seemed that the warp gate had taken him to another country and these men were soldiers, although he didn't know what kind of country still had soldiers who used spears and swords as their main weapons. One, under what charges? Onahe said between grunts. Even without knowing where he was, he couldn't cause problems that would end up affecting his country. The young man released one of his hands from the spear he was holding and pointed it behind the hero. For burning down an entire village, surrender yourself or we will use force, he said, accompanied by a warning. The hero turned around and finally realized that the first attack he had launched against the villains, which had collided with a wall, had caused a massive fire that spread throughout the village. He hadn't expected the place to be made of wood. Were they made of wood? Who the hell builds their houses out of wood these days? He asked no one in particular, absorbed in the scene he had created, the families fleeing the place aided by more soldiers like the ones who were detaining him. But before Endeavor could do or say anything else, a figure dressed entirely in black appeared behind him and with a precise blow to the back of the head knocked him out. The attacker wore a completely black suit with a blood-red seal embroidered on the right shoulder of his suit and a mask that only left his eyes visible. Upon seeing him, the soldiers who were still surprised by the sudden appearance immediately identified the uniform. It was that of a member of one of the kingdom's elite assassination units. The soldier who had been speaking to Endeavor earlier approached the newly appeared man to speak with him. The young soldier closed his right fist and struck the upper left side of his chest with it. This action was the kingdom's military salute. Sir, may I ask why a member of the shadow unit is here? He spoke respectfully to the man who most likely outranked him. The black-clad assassin proceeded to explain, keeping his attention on the red-haired man he had knocked down in case he woke up. One, the magicians in the capital have detected the appearance of a powerful dimensional magic in the area. The guardian Demiurge Sama has ordered to capture everything that comes out of the gate. I need you and your soldiers to move through the forest to the south in the direction of the gate. There you will meet with other military units recently sent. Work with them and secure the gate until a fortress is built on our side. In the meantime, capture everything that comes out of the gate, preferably alive. I will take this guy and the other two for interrogation. 1. The murderer finishes his explanation. The soldier immediately repeated his military salute, accepting the new orders he had received. 1. Yes, sir. Onahei turned to address his men. An order from one of the guards was always the priority when you heard, everyone, head towards Ibasha Forest. Onahei indicated to his men, who immediately responded vehemently. 1. Yes, sir. All his men shouted at the same time. On the other side of the door, about a week had passed since Endeavor reported the appearance of the mysterious structure. Since then no one heard from him again. Currently several local scientists were found analyzing the door, accompanied by some heroes and some politicians interested in the strange structure. 1. Amazing. One of the scientists shouted with excitement. One analysis indicates that this door emits a strange, extremely powerful energy never seen before. Onahei announced the results that the machines gave to everyone present. Another of the scientists looked at the device in his hand, amazed at the results the machine was producing. 1. The energy matches David Shield's theory of dimensional energy, Onahei told those present. 1. What does that mean? 1 asked one of the politicians present, who was wearing a black suit and shirt and sunglasses. 1. There is a chance that this door is a dimensional portal. 1. The scientist explained in wonder. Another of the scientists approached the politician in simpler words. This door could lead us to a completely new world, full of resources, minerals and information completely new and unknown to us. 1. The scientist said with a terrifying smile that quickly spread to the politician he was speaking to. The politician flashed a huge, rather unpleasant smile. Then it's a blessing this thing appeared in Japan. How long will it take us to send people through the gate? He asked the scientists. Another of the scientists approached Himon. We still need to assess the stability of the portal, find its power source, and analyze the radiation it emits. At this rate, it will take 2 weeks, although if you want it sooner, I recommend bringing in more scientific personnel, Onahei told the politician. The politician placed his hand on his chin, his pose thoughtful. Maybe we should call some scientists from my island, the man commented as he looked at the enormous door. Suddenly a high-pitched sound interrupted the conversation. One of the machines the scientist had began to emit a strange noise. Seeing this, the scientist held the equipment and analyzed the graphs it showed. What's going on? 1. The politician asked, intrigued by the mysterious sound. The scientist seemed really worried about the constant beeping. 1. It can't be. Something is. 1. The scientist said, the space he left between his words indicating how surprised he was. The other scientist seemed more serious about the matter. 1. Something is crossing the door, Onahei said seriously, although a little fear could be noticed in his voice. 1. Prepare the heroes, we have no idea what will come through the door, the scientist told the politician, with clear concern in his voice. The politician turned around, reaching out to the heroes he had brought as security. 1. Heroes. Get ready, something is coming through the door, Onahei warned them. Instantly the group of 5 heroes accompanying the politicians and scientists got into a fighting stance, preparing to fight anything that came out of the door. But then the unexpected happened. A single being did not cross the door. They were Miles, a damn army moving with surprising mastery. Divided into 5 groups, the first group were soldiers dressed in silver armor with huge shields in one of their hands and in the other hand they carried a long sword. The second group wore light armor with silver pieces covering the important parts of their body. In their hands they carried spears and at their waists swords. The third group made up of archers, the fourth were knights in silver armor riding horses, and the last group were people wearing strange tunics and staffs. The heroes knew it, even with their quirks they would not be rivals for an army of about 8,000 soldiers or more. All the heroes, politicians and scientists were terrified in front of this army. As if it were a well-oiled machine, all the members of the army moved with identical movements, moving to each side, opening a path between them. In the middle of the path a human with simple features and black hair walked slowly towards the group of terrified politicians, scientists and heroes. His steps were sure, he had his hands behind his back, mixed with his fine clothes, they gave the man an elegant air. 1. Let me introduce myself, Onahei said after stopping right in front of the group of Japanese, looking at each of them out of the corner of his eye. 1. Gentlemen, my name is Lacure, I am the political representative appointed by my king, Onehe said with a nod at the end of his sentence. Those present realized that this man spoke their language and seemed reasonable, so the best option would be to talk to him and avoid a conflict. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Lacuer. I am Koku Hanabata, a politician from the nation of Japan, in which we currently find ourselves. Onehe responded by trying to establish a domino from the beginning even though he was the one threatened by the army. The politician on the other side of the door, Bosun, I regret my arrival, so regretful, but I want you to know that our king does not seek war, Onehe said calmly. After that statement, the Japanese politician looked with a bit of irony at the army that this man had brought with him. That's a very strange comment, considering they came with an army, Onehe said with irony. Lacuer alarming with superiority before the attack attempt that the other politician had attempted on him. Well, you will understand that after the attack, my king took precautions. Onehe responded to the other politician in the room as if his words were a dagger. Hanabata blinked in confusion at Lacuer's response. One attack. I didn't understand what the man was referring to. Seeing the bewilderment of the Japanese, the politician from the other world proceeded to explain. It seems you were not informed. Allow me to explain. An individual from your world caused an entire village to burn down. During interrogation, this individual identified himself as a member of this world's peacekeepers. He indicated that his name was Enji Todoroki, although he also identified himself as Endeavoron. I explained to the politician and the scientists, who were really surprised by the information. The Japanese politician bit his tongue in the rage he felt at that moment. That world is the gateway to a huge amount of resources. And now there's going to be political trouble because of Endeavor's actions, and if we directly attack the other side, the global community would give us a severe reprimand. Onehe cursed inwardly. Lacuer ignored the situation the Japanese were in and continued talking. But luckily for you, my king has decided to forgive this transgression and return the man known as Endeavor to you. If you give us the area around the portal to build a fortress, of course, we will allow scientists to analyze your side of the structure, and not only that, as a show of good faith, my king will send one of his sons to this side to learn of your culture, of course only if you deem it acceptable. He explained gently, although for a politician as experienced as Hanabata, it was easy to realize that the man in front of him felt very superior. Hanabata really didn't have much of a choice. After all, according to what this man said, Endeavor burned an entire village. At least accepting the conditions would prevent an unfavorable political situation. Besides, if the king's son came to his side in time, they could reach a good political situation. Hanabata pointed out. Onu, accept your terms. Onehe stretched out his hand towards the foreign representative. We will await the arrival of your prince in a week. Lacuer took her hand in a pinch, and with that action, the pact was sealed. After this strange meeting, a new meeting between Japan's top politicians took place. One of the politicians gathered at the table was quite upset. Hanabata, why did you give them control of the gate? Onehe shouted as he slammed his fist on the table. Hanabata remained relaxed despite being targeted by the nation's other politicians. Even by the standards of our world, Endeavor's actions in a foreign nation would be cause for war. Now that we have made contact with a civilization from a different world, our actions will have a greater impact. Not only for us, but also for the global community. Also, according to those people, the king of that nation sends his son to this world to learn our culture. If we gain his trust in the not-too-distant future, we could have total control of the gate. Also, to be honest, they are not a great threat to us. Their civilization seems to be in the middle of the Middle Ages. With the heroes and their quirks, it will be easy to control them if they become hostile. Onehe explained his reasoning to the rest of the men and women at the table. The politicians began to converse among themselves, speaking in low voices, discussing the effectiveness of their colleague's idea. Fine, I understand that, but we really don't have a facility suitable for housing a prince, and even using quirks it would be impossible to prepare a suitable place within a week's time. A woman dressed in an elegant suit explained. Suddenly the doors of the room opened, letting in a black-haired man wearing an elegant black suit. I think I can help you with that. The newcomer announced with immense confidence. The men in the room turned to see the newly arrived man, immediately identifying the person in front of them. After all, he was one of the most important and influential businessmen in Japan. Mr. Yaoyorozu, what are you doing here? The politician asked. The alarming man with what was supposed to be a friendly smile. I heard about this meeting and thought my services might be needed. You see, as you know, my family lives in a luxurious mansion, which they believe will be a suitable environment for the prince. The man commented. The politicians at the table looked at each other, unsure of the man's motives. And what will you gain from that? One of the politicians asked suspiciously. The man took his hand out of his pockets and held it out as if he were presenting something. As you know, this is a new world with the possibility of obtaining known and unknown resources. The only thing I want in return is that when I get the prince's permission to explore his territory, it will allow my company to work more closely together to obtain resources. Onehei explained his intentions without any hesitation. The politicians looked at each other and they all nodded. Well, Mr. Yaoyorozu, we accept your proposal, but we ask that you treat the prince with the utmost care and respect. As our relations with your country started in a horrible way, it goes without saying that any harm or inconvenience suffered by the prince could trigger a war, which would put us in a bad position with the world community. One of these people considered losing a war with the other side, but they would still prefer to avoid armed conflict. The man put his hand on his chest. I will accept the risk. I will take my family with me to the gate to greet the prince, that way he will meet us all at once. I warned the gathered politicians. Well, that's adequate. The politicians agreed with each other. The week passed. The Yaoyorozu family were walking through the forest accompanied by some heroes for security and political representatives of Japan. After a few minutes they arrived at their destination, but it looked different than what they expected. Surrounding the door a gigantic fortress appeared. The men and women were amazed to see the enormous fortress that the people from another world had erected in less than a week. How strange, that wasn't there a week ago, Hanabata commented, the only one present who had been there the previous week. Lord Yaoyorozu looked at the newly erected fortress with intrigue. Maybe they have better construction methods than we expected. Onehei turned his attention from the fortress to his daughter Momo. Don't forget, we are about to have contact with a prince from the other side. Treat it in the best possible way or you could cause a political conflict. I alert your daughter. The girl with jet black hair and onyx eyes looking at her father's words. Don't worry dad, I'll behave properly. The girl looking on, feeling nervous at the moment of meeting a foreign royalty. A moment later the enormous metal doors of the fortress began to open. On the other side the Yaoyorozu, the politicians and the heroes saw a figure surrounded by dozens of knights wearing golden armor, so they assumed that the figure in the middle was the prince. The prince seemed to be a young man about the age of the Yaoyorozu's daughter. He wore a black robe, had dark green hair and emerald eyes. When he got close enough to the group of Japanese, the knights surrounding him moved away. Finally the prince raised his voice. It is a pleasure to meet you, representatives from Japan. Onehei stopped his tirade to give a small bow in respect. My name is Isizuku Ooal Gown. The prince announced with pride. The throne room on the 10th floor of the Great Tomb of Nazarick was a gigantic room that could easily be occupied by thousands of people. Although in this world this place is considered a sacred place which very few had the chance to see. Lit by huge chandeliers that constantly released light thanks to the continuous light spell. On each side of the long and wide corridor that led to the front of the throne, 41 pillars stood. On each pillar a flag was displayed showing its glory. Each of the flags had a different shield, representing the 41 members that once made up the guild. At the head of the room was a black throne which seemed to be made of obsidian, and above the throne was a flag that represented the guild symbol and the symbol that was currently the flag that represented the Sorcerer Kingdom. At the front of the room, Death Incarnate sat upon the great throne. His body was made of white bones so clean they looked like marble. A large red orb nestled inside his ribs. He wore a black academic robe that looked like it had been pulled from the black firmament of the night. His robe had two enormous shoulder pads resembling bone horns, in the middle of which sat two red spheres. Each of his bony fingers was adorned with a beautifully crafted ring, each ring looking as though it was worth a fortune impossible to pay, and above his skull, hidden by the hood of his robe, a black halo of pure darkness floated. At the side of the throne were 4 beautiful women. The first of them was a woman with jet black hair. She was wearing a white dress that highlighted her well-formed figure, which would be the envy of all women. Around her neck she wore a spiderweb-shaped necklace, and her beautiful white skin made her look like a perfect woman. The only non-human features they possessed were the black wings that came out of her waist, the 2 horns on her head and her divided yellow pupils. The next woman standing next to the throne appeared to be a girl. Despite her seemingly young age, this woman had unusually large breasts, completely white skin, white hair, blood-red eyes, 2 sharp fangs in her mouth, and was wearing an elegant purple dress. The third woman was a dark elf with blonde hair and heterochromatic eyes who was around her youthful years. She had a well-formed body, but instead of an elegant dress she had an elegant vest and white pants suit. Her vest covered her red shirt with a scaled design. She had 1 green eye and 1 blue eye, as well as a golden acorn-shaped necklace. Finally, the last woman in the room next to the throne was a young girl, whose hair was parted in black and white, each located on one side of her head. She had heterochromatic eyes, 1 white and 1 black, and fine, white skin. In front of the throne, 4 people were kneeling with their heads bowed. These were the 4 sons of the Sorcerer King Ainz Ooal, his eldest son and firstborn Beelzebub Ooal, born with his wife Albedo, appeared to be a young man of about 18 years old. He wore golden armor and tied to his waist was his sword. At first glance he was a young man extremely similar to his mother, although his face had some differences. Her second daughter Eleanor Ooal was a young woman of apparently 17 years old. She had white hair, red eyes and fangs. She had an enormous resemblance to her mother Shaltir, and like her she wore a beautiful purple dress. The only difference with her mother was that Eleanor had been able to develop her breasts, so unlike her mother she did not need to use padding. His third daughter Serena Ooal had the appearance of a young woman of about 16 years old. She was a young woman with short hair, and like her mother she had her hair parted in 2, divided into the colors black and white, with heterochromatic pupils of the colors black and white. She had beautiful white skin, and unlike her older sister she does not wear a dress. She was currently wearing golden armor. At her side leaning on the ground there was a sickle. The fourth son of the Sorcerer King, Isizuku Ooal. The youngest son of the Sorcerer King, wore a black robe like his father's but with a simpler design, without the gold embroidery and without the huge shoulder pads. He had the appearance of a young man of about 14 years old. Second son of his wife Albedo, he shares several similarities with her. The black wings coming out of his waist, 2 horns coming out of both sides of his head, and his divided pupils. But unlike the other children of the Sorcerer King, Isizuku was born with unique characteristics, such as his emerald eyes, his hair a shade of green, and the 4 freckles that adorned each of his cheeks. According to the investigations that were done after his birth, these unique characteristics are due to the fact that Isizuku was born with a unique ability called Mirror of Greed, which had the side effect of giving him these characteristics. After a few minutes of silence, a voice echoed loudly throughout the throne room. "One, my dear children, you may stand up." One, the Overlord ordered his sons, who instantly obeyed his words, abandoning their kneeling position and standing up. One, I suppose you are already aware of the situation that took place inside the MHA forest and whose effects caused a fire in a small Rurik village near the forest, MHA told his children. Beelzebub placed his hand on his chest as he stepped forward. "One, father, this transgression cannot be forgiven. We must strike back." One, the Overlord firstborn said, clearly angry at the situation. The third daughter, Serene, nodded in agreement with her brother's words. "One, I agree with my brother. If we do not launch a counterattack, the enemy will see us as weak opponents." One, the princess said with her sickle in her hand. The first prince spoke again. "One, father, if you give me a squadron I will command it myself on the other side of the door. I promise I will not fail you." MHA said, after which he knelt on one leg in front of his father, waiting for his permission. The second daughter of the Supreme Being, Eleanor, opened her fan and used it to elegantly cover the lower part of her face. "One, I think they are wrong. Launching an attack now would not be a good option." One, the princess gave her opinion. Beelzebub, still on his knees, turned his head towards his sister, with a slight annoyance barely concealed in his voice. "One, what are you talking about, sister? Don't you understand that we suffered an attack? That guy burned the houses of all the inhabitants of that village." One, the prince told his sister, a little annoyed because she denied his request to his father. The third princess immediately began to speak in support of her older brother. "One, furthermore, we need to immediately secure the other side to prevent more such people from crossing into our world." One, She told her sister. Shaltir's daughter smiled arrogantly under her fan, ready to express her ideas to her father, hoping he would flatter her. "One, your plan is to attack a completely different world of which we do not know the military potential or any information about its civilization. Onehei hoped his father would realize the foresight he was taking into account the situation. The first prince stood up again, approaching his sister. If we don't attack now they'll think we're weak and it will be like inviting them to launch a larger invasion force into our world. Onehei made his point. The princess in the purple dress argued again with her brother's plan. The man who burned the village said during interrogation that he did not intend to burn the village, that he was only trying to capture the other 2 people who went through the gate. He said the fire was an accident. One explained to his brothers. The princess with the sickle also approached her sister, bringing the sickle dangerously close to her sister's face, who did not even blink, aware that her sister would not harm her. And you believe him? It's possible that those 2 are his accomplices and he's lying, Onehei answered his sister. Eleanor nodded at her sister's words. Without confirming or denying that information we cannot launch a large-scale attack, Onehei explained to his brothers. At that moment, Ainz's 3 eldest sons began to argue. Despite their age they still behaved like children. Then Ainz fixed his gaze on his youngest son. The Supreme Being observed his green-haired son and noticed that there was a strong shine in his gaze. He had seen that shine in his eyes before. He always had it when he was sure he had something important. The Supreme Being knew very well that all his children sought his constant approval, so seeing that look in the eyes of his youngest son, in this situation, meant that his son had really good information and it was likely that he had already developed a plan. Apparently he was just waiting for the right moment to say it. The Supreme spoke. Isizuku. His children immediately stopped arguing when they heard their father speak. You've been keeping very quiet, do you have anything to say? The Overlord commented, drawing the attention of everyone present to his youngest son. The look in the freckled boy's eyes lit up brightly. Hearing those words from his father, the green-haired boy thought that his father had seen through him again and was giving him permission to comment on the information he had gathered and his ideas. The freckled one lowered his head to his father. Thank you, Father. Onehei bowed in respect before beginning his tirade. Before coming to this meeting, I paid a visit to Neuronist and asked him to give me a copy of the report with the information he extracted from the arsonist and the other 2 people who accompanied him. Onehei stretched his hand into the air, opening his dimensional storage and extracting some papers that were presumably the report. According to the information extracted by Neuronist. These men come from a world where only humans exist. But the curious thing about this world is that in it, humans have developed special biological abilities which after an analysis of the 3 subjects we discovered that they have no relation to magic. According to these men they call their abilities quirks or gifts. Each person has a unique and distinct gift, which gives them abilities from producing fire, ice or lightning, to super strength, enhanced senses and in some cases complex mutations. He explained to his family members. After finishing saying the first part of what he had discovered and planned, the freckled man looked at his father, noticing how the flames in his eyes lit up brightly. For anyone who doesn't know his father, this might seem normal or simply go unnoticed, but for the people who knew him well, like his brothers and the inhabitants of Nazareth, they knew that the Supreme Being was ecstatic and very interested in the information. So, seeing that he had his father's attention, he decided not to lose it and show the Supreme Being what he was capable of. He continued with his tirade. Thanks to the analysis and experiments that Neuronist performed with the help of Demiurge on the captured subjects, we discovered that their gifts are teleportation within a radius of 100 meters, regular hydrokinesis and the ability to create fire from their own body, in addition to which we obtained information about their civilization, history and interesting information about these gifts. Oneh's family seemed very interested in the information he had brought with him, which made him very happy. The Overlord leaned slightly in his throne, placing his hand on his bony, sharp chin. That is interesting. Abandoning his previous thinking pose, he crossed his fingers in front of his eyes and leaned a little further forward on his throne. So Izuku, I imagine you've already put together a plan on how to deal with the situation, Onehei told his son. The freckled boy smiled with immense happiness, proud that his father had at least a hint of curiosity about his plan. As always, Father, you have seen through my intentions again. The freckled man said as he would suppose Demiurge would, the smartest guardian only behind his father. The Overlord lamented inwardly. It seemed everyone in the new world thought of him as an omniscient being with the ability to foresee any situation, and despite his multiple attempts to make the general population, his guardians, the members of Nazarick and even his own children understand that he also makes mistakes. Everyone thought he was simply being humble. The Supreme knew that at some point, this excessively high opinion that everyone in the world had of him could cause him trouble, even if it hadn't in the last hundreds of years, but for the moment he preferred to remain silent and let his son continue with the explanation of his plan. The freckled man considered his father's silence as his permission to continue speaking. One, thanks to the information collected by Neuronist, a broader understanding of their society has been achieved. Firstly, they seem to have an advanced technological level. They are unaware of the concept of magic and have a negative idea of war. One, I explained to those present. Serene seemed a little annoyed and somewhat jealous that her little brother had attracted his father's attention, so she proceeded to try to foil his plan. One, so what's your plan? To leave that man's actions unpunished? One said to her in a slightly loud tone of voice. Beelzebub nodded as he took a step towards his younger brother. One, I agree with our sister, Izuku. Even though they have a negative concept of war, we cannot leave a transgression unpunished. That would make us look weak. One gave his brother a valid point. The freckled one smiled at his brother's words and on the contrary. Dear brothers, we will take advantage of that man's actions to control the other side without them realizing it. One, I explained to his brothers. Eleanor nodded at her sister's words. One exclaimed with interest, apparently understanding what his little brother's plan was. One, so you plan to take advantage of his anti-war policy, little brother? One said it more as a question than a statement. The freckled one nodded. One, exactly sister. One, after confirming his sister's words, he turned his full attention back to his father to propose his plan. One, what I propose, father, is to gather a small army consisting only of humans using weak armor and weapons with few enchantments and send them through the gate. O'Neil explained. Before the freckled man could continue expressing his plan, his sister with the armor and the sickle in her hand interrupted him. Onin army with a weak arsenal, no summoned units and only made up of humans. One looked at his green-haired brother with a penetrating gaze that would have made any normal man tremble. One, what do you plan to do with such a weak army? One, I asked, not understanding my brother's intentions. One, war of lies, sister. One, it was the freckled one's response, which caused his first and third brothers to look at each other trying to see if the other had understood the statement, while in the case of the Supreme One, he already had an idea of where the plan was going. One, thanks to the information collected by Neuronist, I learned that before the appearance of the gifts in that world, your planet went through multiple historical eras, including the so-called Middle Ages, which has a great kinship with our current times. What I propose is to make that world believe that we are an underdeveloped civilization that is in an era similar to the Middle Ages. Send human soldiers through the door and a human diplomat, thus preventing them from knowing the multiple species that make up the kingdom and preventing them from knowing our true military potential. Request control of the surroundings on your side of the door and send someone to learn about your society and study the effects of magic on quirks. And the freckled one explained. The first prince nodded in understanding. One, okay, I understand about deceiving people on that side, but what makes you believe that they will give us control of their side of the door? One, Beelzebub asked. The freckled man widened his smile. That was just the answer he was waiting for. One, through interrogation, we discovered that unlike the other two men who entered our world, the attacker who caused the fire is actually a member of the other world's peacekeepers called heroes, who are in charge of the safety of civilians and the enforcement of quirk control laws on the other side. Apparently this specific guy is one of the top-ranked heroes in his world. So he has a high value to the people of his world. We will tell the people of the other world about the fire that burned an entire village caused by a member of their world's peacekeepers, which would be a cause for war. So if the people in the country that is on the other side started a war caused by him, with an underdeveloped otherworldly country, they would be seriously reprimanded by the rest of the nations of that world. They will have no choice but to hand over control of their side of the gate to Yusonehe, told his impressed listeners. The vampire princess looked at her brother with doubt. One, I must admit that this plan of yours is interesting, little brother, but if I may ask, what are you planning to do to get them to allow us to send someone from our world to secretly investigate the other side? One, that was the part of the plan that the freckled man hadn't explained. The freckled man looked at his sister calmly, already having the answer prepared for that question. One, simple sister, we will disguise that act as an act of good faith. Think about it, a human from an unknown world burns a village and the affected nation is willing to forgive him. They even send someone of great political value through the door as a sign of good faith and so that he learns about their culture. In that way the people on the other side will try to win over the envoy under the idea that this way he will have greater influence in our kingdom. Onehei explained his reasoning. Ainz gave a slight nod. Onate's a good plan, Izuku, but why instead of sending an envoy, we just don't send reconnaissance summoned units like Hanzo's or eight-edged assassins? One the Supreme asked as a test of his son's reasoning. He already knew the answer to that question. He just wanted to see if his son had considered that in his plan or had simply gone down the path of sending an undercover agent for another reason. The freckled boy looked at his father with intrigue. He realized that this question was a test from his father. It was obvious that he wanted to test whether his reasons were correct and whether he was taking the necessary precautions when forming his plan. So he had to answer correctly if he wanted to impress his father. One simple father. Despite the information gathered, there is still much we don't know about the other side's technological level and quirks. There could be someone with quirks capable of seeing through the abilities of the Hanzos and eight-edged assassins, or even their technology could be able to see through their invisibility. It is safer to send someone to control the infiltrated units directly from the other side. Onehei explained his thought process to his father, hoping it was correct. Silence filled the room as everyone present waited for the Overlord response to the freckled man's words. One ha 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 ha. One the silence was finally broken by the laughter of the last of the Supreme Beings. And interesting, I take it you already have someone in mind to send to the door. One the Overlord asked his son. Despite his attempts to hide it, the freckled man couldn't help but let a huge smile of pride appear on his face after his father's apparent admission of his plan. One yes father. One this was the moment he had been waiting for, the day he would finally show his true worth to his entire family, the day his father would finally let him prove himself. He took a step forward and bent his right leg, adopting a kneeling position while placing his left hand at the level of his heart, as dictated by protocol when addressing the Supreme One. I humbly volunteer for this mission. Oneh's voice echoed throughout the throne room. He closed his eyes tightly, waiting for his father's answer, wishing with all his heart that his father would allow him to fulfill a mission of such importance. For a minute silence filled the throne room. Everyone was shocked by the freckled man's request. The Overlord looked at his son, paying special attention to the aura of determination that emanated from him. He kept his face serious, even though a whirlwind of thoughts lashed through his mind. One He wants to go to the other side. Onehei mentally screamed with worry, shifting his gaze to his right side, observing his first wife and prime minister of the kingdom, Albedo, who had an expression of pure rage. It's clear that she doesn't like the idea. Onehei closed his eyes to meditate for a moment on his options. One I had already received that information from Neuronist and created a plan, but I must admit that his idea of deceiving the other side is a good plan. Besides, allowing him to take care of this alone will be a good opportunity for him to grow. Onehei let out a mental sigh before continuing. One I guess I'll have to give in. One finally came to a resolution. The silence was finally broken, when the last of the Supreme Beings broke it with his words. One okay Izuku, I approve your request. Oneh's response to his son's request immediately caused a commotion in the throne room. One but father, one Beelzebub was the first to speak. His firstborn was interrupted by the angry words of the succubus queen. One darling, you can't send Izuku alone to that world full of inferior creatures. One She complained to her husband. Suddenly the Overlord stood up, stretching his hand into the air and shaking it elegantly from one end to the other. One what a scandal, I demand silence. One with his order, everyone present fell silent, ending the complaints. Onave already made my decision, this is Izuku's plan and he will be the one to carry it out. Onehei stopped talking for a few moments, fixing his gaze on his green-haired son. One Izuku, even though your plan is good, you must understand that showing too much weakness, even if it is to deceive the enemy, is not good. One the freckled man nodded at the bit of wisdom his father had just imparted to him. One for security I will send a squad of human mages along with the army that will cross the door. On the other side you have my permission to use martial arts. I will give you a list of the items you are authorized to use and you will only be able to use magic up to level 3. One the Supreme told him the limitations he would have in the other world. The freckled man who was still in the kneeling position lowered his head even further. One yes father, Onehei said with perhaps the greatest pride he had ever felt in his life. After giving his orders to the freckled one, The Supreme One turned his attention to his other children. One Beelzebub, Eleanor, Serene, the three of you will be in charge of building solid defenses in case of an invasion on our side of the gate. Onehei ordered them. The three princes immediately knelt down, imitating the pose their brother was in. One yes father one they said at the same time. With his orders given, the Overlord stood up from the throne, reaching for his staff which immediately floated into his grasp. One my children already have their missions, fulfill them and do not disappoint me. One I wave the scepter from side to side in an elegant movement tone and don't forget, the name Ainz Ooal knows no defeat. One with his last words spoken, the Overlord teleported out of the throne room accompanied by his 4 wives. The freckled man stood up. Once standing, he let out a sigh that he had been holding back. One that went pretty well. Onehei commented to himself, before receiving a strong blow to the head. One also. One the freckled man groaned, holding his bruised area as he gave his attacker a stern look. One Beelzebub baptism, what happens to you? Onehei asked, annoyed by the surprise attack. His brother had a furious expression on his face. One you plan to go to a new world completely alone and without Gardsonius brother told the facts with a calmness that did not match the mood expressed on his face. One you are crazy. One and there is the explosion of fury that the freckled man had been waiting for. His third sister, Serene, stepped forward, again in support of her brother. Anna that's true, that's too risky, Oneh's sister told him. Eleanor began to walk with refined steps towards the freckled man. One I agree with them, it seems that you are not worried about your safety, little brother, Onehei said as he slammed his fan with the palm of his other hand, slamming it shut. The freckled boy looked at the three of them with annoyance while he was still rubbing the area of his head hit by his older brother. Onehei already told you to stop treating me like a child, if something happens I can defend myself. One the freckled one claimed them. The princess with the sickle gave him an accusing look. One your hand-to-hand and weapon combat skills are basic, Oneh's sister answered him. 1+ you can only use level 6 magicone. Eleanor finished the criticism that her other sister had started. The freckled man looked at them with a slight, almost imperceptible but still noticed by his brother's pout. One I am 14 years old, I am no longer a child, and for safety I will carry several items with me to protect myself. His older brother held his forehead with his hand as he turned his head from side to side in concern. One at least tell me they are not your item prototypes. Onehei saw how the freckled man looked away at the comment. One are they? One it was said more as a statement than a question, and the freckled man's lack of response earned him another blow to the head. One also. One once again the green-haired prince held his head in pain. Eleanor shook her head at her little brother's irresponsibility. One many of your prototypes have not been tested, little brother, it is still too early to take them to the field. Onehei threw that comment at his brother, which stuck like a dagger in his chest. The freckled man was quick to refute his brother's claims. One not so sister. I think this is the best opportunity to try them. One I try to explain. One remember when you tried to craft an item to boost father's summons. When you activated it, you caused an explosion that completely destroyed your workshop. Onehei reminded him, to the freckled man's shame. Oneth that was just a small mistake I made, I already fixed it. Onehei said considerably nervous with the memory of one of his failures. The vampire princess shook her head at her brother's clearly unsure response. One still, it's very reckless of you. This is the first real mission father has given you. I think you should take more precautions, Oneh's sister told him critically. The freckled prince tried to refute Oneth that's what I do, all the items I prepare have their functionality assured, I will not waste this opportunity, I will show father what I am truly capable of, Onehei told his brothers proudly. The vampiress let out a slightly disappointed sigh at her brother's constant refusal. One listen Isizuku, even if those two with muscle brains don't say it. Onehei said while pointing at Beelzebub and Serenion we care about you, that's why I ask you, little brother, to at least carry minor summoning items with you in case of an emergency, Onehei asked the freckled man with surprising kindness. The freckled boy thought about it for a moment, he wanted to use the items he had made as a sample of his achievements for his father, but he supposed that it wouldn't be bad to bring those extra items just as a precaution, his items would work, he wouldn't even need to use the emergency ones. One well sister, if that's why, I'll do it. One the freckled man ended up accepting his sister's request. Eleanor smiled a little more calmly. One thanks little brother one. That tender but short moment was interrupted when her other two brothers suddenly approached Eleanor. One who are you calling muscle brain? One Beelzebub angrily complained to his sister. Serene also got dangerously close to her sister, pointing her finger directly at the vampire's chest. One you couldn't make a plan for the father either, don't get carried away. Onehei complained to his sister in response to the small insult she had made to both of them. Izuku just stood there silently watching his three older brothers argue with each other. At this sight he just smiled and stood there silently, enjoying what could be called family time. It had been a week since they sent the army through the gate. Everything had gone according to plan and today would be the day Izuku would leave for the other world. After saying goodbye to his brothers, he advanced towards the portal accompanied by his personal guard. After passing through the portal, he could see a fortress built around the door. Upon seeing it, the guards knelt, but the freckled man ordered them to continue with their work until the lookout announced that representatives from Japan were waiting outside the fortress. Well, show time, Onehei commented to himself. The gates of the fortress opened, the freckled path towards the representatives. Upon seeing them he immediately realized that there were 3 representatives from Japan and what appeared to be a family made up of a father, mother and a daughter, who seemed to be Izuku's age. I look at the young lady, who even by the standards of her world was very developed for her age. When he arrived in front of them, the freckled man proceeded to introduce himself. It is a pleasure to meet you, representatives from Japan. Before continuing he made a slight bow. My name is Isizuku Ooal. He decided to go for a short presentation. Japan's politicians immediately recovered from the prince's shock and proceeded to introduce themselves. It's a pleasure to meet you, Prince Isizuku Ooal. We are the representatives of Japan. We apologize again for the incident that Endeavor caused. The closest politician made the brief presentation accompanied by an apology for what had happened. The freckled man waved his hand nonchalantly. There is no need to worry about that, although as you will understand until our nation has more confidence in yours we will not allow any foreigner to pass through the door yet. Onehei kindly explained to those present. The Japanese politician agreed with what the prince said. It is understandable. I hope that with your presence here the relations between our countries can improve, Onehei said, after which he bowed to the freckled man. The freckled man imitated the show of respect. By the way, you'd better keep up our end of the deal. After saying that he snapped his fingers. After snapping his fingers, a group of guards approached the politicians, while they dragged an immobile Endeavor. His suit was torn, no longer emitting flames, and several bruises could be seen around his body. According to the agreed deal, we hand over the man who set the village on fire, Onehei said as he stretched out his hand to show the unconscious man. The guards threw Endeavor's motionless body to the ground in front of the Japanese politicians, the Yaoyorozu family, and the prince. None of the Japanese politicians or members of the Yaoyorozu family had expected to see the imposing and menacing number 2 hero Endeavor in this manner. Honestly, the image seemed unreal. Now that they had fulfilled their part of the deal, the freckled man turned his attention to the family that accompanied the group of politicians. If I may ask, Onehei pointed at the Yaoyorozu family. Who are those people? One asked. The politician stopped looking at Endeavor's motionless body to answer the freckled man's question. You are one. The politician cleared his throat. I apologize for not having introduced you. This is the Yaoyorozu family. They will be responsible for your needs during your stay in Japan, Onehei explained to the freckled prince. The freckled man approached the Yaoyorozu family and gave them a slight bow. It's a pleasure to meet you, Yaoyorozu family. I hope we can get along well. The freckled man said sincerely. The patriarch of the family nodded to the words spoken by the young man in front of him. Likewise, Prince Isizuku, allow me to introduce you to our family. My name is Hamada Yaoyorozu. The man paused to point to a woman in a long dress standing at his side. This is my wife Shima Yaoyorozu, he said, after which he pointed to the last member of his family. From what the freckled man could see, it was his daughter and she is my daughter Momo Yaoyorozu, he said, concluding his presentation. The prince nodded. It's a pleasure to meet you all 3.1. The first politician to make contact with the otherworldly civilization, Koku Hanabata, approached the freckled prince with a small bow. We are glad you are with us, Prince Gown. One with his hand he signaled towards the exit of the forest. If you would be so kind as to accompany us, we will take you to the transport that will take us to the place where we will accommodate you. Onehei asked the freckled one. The freckled one nodded. Oname coming after you, one confirmed. After that the group began to advance towards the exit of the forest, while the other two politicians who had been present helped to take Endeavor out of the forest. After a few minutes of walking in which none of those present said a word, they finally reached the exit of the forest, although what Izuku saw caused his body to shudder. Hundreds of people were gathered at the end of the forest, some holding black devices and others trying to get through the police who were keeping them away from the area where the Yaoyorozu family's limousine was located. Seeing so many people gathered in one place with strange devices, for a second the freckled man mistook it for a trap. The freckled man immediately stopped a trap, Onehei said out loud with concern in his voice. The politicians and the Yaoyorozu family were confused upon hearing that, but quickly realized that the prince had confused the reporters and civilians who had come to see him with an attack. They were about to explain the situation to the prince when they saw the freckled man make a quick movement, moving his robes and revealing that underneath it was a sword sheathed at his waist, which the young man held without removing it from its sheath, while preparing to use magic and activate some martial arts. Hanabata, like the rest of those present, was surprised to see the sword. Don't worry, Prince Gaon, these are just reporters and civilians who came to see your arrival, Onehei said in an attempt to calm the prince's nerves. The freckled man recognized the word civilians, but had no idea what a reporter was, since they were not necessary in his kingdom. If there was something important to tell the population, the message would simply be sent through the holographic crystals located in the squares of all the cities and villages in the kingdom. The freckled man blinked a couple of times in confusion. One reporter. Onehei asked the meaning of that word. Don't you know he's a reporter? One of the politicians asked curiously, and the response he got from the freckled man was a shake of his head. Hanabata realized that from what they knew of Izuku's world, they seemed to have no technology, so most likely in their world the news only spread by word of mouth. The politician was about to explain it when the Yaoyorozu's daughter stepped forward, and for the first time since they met Izuku she spoke to him. Reporters are people who investigate interesting facts and use technology to broadcast them to the world. As you understand, Prince Gaon, the arrival of a prince from a different world is an important event, so all these reporters came with the intention of taking pictures of you or talking to you. The young woman explained in an elegant and refined manner. That explanation was enough for the freckled man to understand what was happening. Even the word photography was something familiar to him. After all, in his kingdom there are also photographs, only unlike this world, photographs in the Sorcerer Kingdom were taken through recording orbs, which could record and store videos and photographs of different events. Calmer, the freckled man relaxed his posture. I apologize for my reaction, but I hope you understand that being new to your world there are many things I don't know, and seeing such a large crowd with so many unknown teams, I assumed it was an attack against me. Onehei gave a slight bow of apology. I hope you forgive me for my reaction, Onehei asked politely. Hanabata nodded to calm the prince. Don't worry, Prince Gaon, but I must warn you that in our country it is not allowed to carry weapons like your sword. I explained while observing with some caution the finely crafted golden-handled weapon. The freckled one nodded. I understand your concern, but I cannot give you my weapon, although I assure you that I will not use it unless I consider that my person is in danger. After saying those words, the prince hid his sword again under his robe. The politician sighed with resignation. Well, I guess we could make an exception based on special circumstances. Onehei really didn't want to start his country's relationship with the prince with an inconvenience over carrying weapons. Thank you for your understanding, said the freckled one. After that brief conversation, they continued walking the short distance to the limousine. When the group came into view of the group of civilians and reporters, the reporters quickly began taking pictures of Izuku, the Yaoyorozu, and the emaciated Endeavor. The reporters approached the group of police officers and heroes blocking their way, trying to get past them and interview the newly arrived prince of the new world. The freckled boy simply ignored the reporters and continued walking in the direction the Yaoyorozu family was pointing him to. They guided him to a limousine. Horseless carriages were not common in the kingdom. What made these vehicles even more surprising was that humans in this world had managed to make them without the use of magic. The green-haired prince had already read about this in the archives of Ashurbanipal's library on the 10th floor of Nazarick. He didn't know how, but somehow his father and the other supreme beings had collected information about vehicles, weapons and technologies of this world, which only made the admiration he had for his father and his friends grow exponentially. "Onate's an interesting vehicle," one the freckled man commented. Despite all the information in Nazarick, he had never seen one of these vehicles on his own, although there was a clear reason why his father prohibited their construction in his native world. Hanabata smiled at the comment, a tiny hint of superiority appearing in his expression. "One, I guess in your world there are no vehicles like this. 1. The matriarch of the Yaoyorozu family spoke after the Japanese politician Onai, "If I may ask, Prince Gown, how do you get around in your world?" "1. The woman asked with genuine curiosity. "1. We primarily use animals as a method of transportation, as saddles, pack animals, or to pull our carts." 1. The freckled one explained. 1. I see. 1. Matriarch Yaoyorozu replied, mentally estimating the technological level of the freckled man's world through the small clues the young man gave them. The rest of the journey passed in silence. During the short trip, people watched the freckled man through the limousine window, in some cases taking pictures. After a few minutes of traveling, they finally arrived at the Yaoyorozu mansion. Most people would be surprised to see the enormous land that the Yaoyorozu family mansion covered, but Izuku couldn't care less. After all, this place fell short in front of the castles throughout the Sorcerer Kingdom that belonged to the royal family and was insignificant when compared to Nazarick. 1. What do you think of our home, Prince Gown? 1. Patriarch Yaoyorozu asked with some pride in his voice. The freckled man kept his expression neutral. 1. It looks nice, he commented with barely hidden indifference in his voice. Upon arriving at the doors of the mansion, they were greeted by several maids and butlers, which as before was indifferent to the prince. The Yaoyorozu family showed the freckled man the room where he would sleep, which was well decorated and full of different objects, a luxury bed and other things. The host family left their guest in the room and went to the living room to talk in private. Once they had the prince settled in his room, the 3 members of the family went to the living room of his mansion to talk more calmly. 1. Well, it seems the prince is comfortable, Mr. Hamada commented. His wife, Shima, nodded in confirmation. 1. So it seems, she told her husband and her only daughter. His father let out a short sigh to release the stress he felt at that moment. 1. Species 1. He said his daughter's name with complete seriousness. His daughter immediately reacted to her father's call. 1. Yes, Dodone, the girl said with a determined look, already having an idea of what her father's words would be. 1. Listen, Momo, your mother and I will have to leave in a few minutes. We have a lot of business outside the country and we will be gone for a long time. As you understand, establishing good relations with the prince is something very important. After all, he could be the key for our company to be able to make use of the resources of his world, and since your mother and I will have to leave, that task will fall to you, Momo. 1. His father said with all the seriousness that the matter required. The young woman nodded seriously and decisively. 1. Yes, Dad, I promise I won't let you down. 1. The girl said, as a member of one of the most important and respected families in Japan, it was her duty to support her family in such matters. Her father nodded, pleased to see the determination in his daughter's eyes. 1. I hope so, Momo. You have to create a good relationship with the prince, try to become friends, try to talk to him about his world. Currently not even the government has much information about his homeworld, and knowing more about what is on the other side of the door can benefit us greatly. Onahe explained to his daughter, who nodded in response. 1. Well, Momo, we trust you. Remember that the outcome of the relationships we establish with the prince can define the future of our company. 1. ONCE. The moment of seriousness was over. His expression changed to a more friendly and fatherly one. 1. We trust you, Momo, Onahe said tenderly to his daughter. The young woman smiled proudly at her father's words. 1 and 1. After that, the 3 members of the family said goodbye and the Yaoyorozu patriarchs got into the limousine, leaving the mansion, after which, the young brunette decided to go see how the prince was. When she reached the door of the room, she began to knock on the door and call the prince. 1. Prince Gown, I'm Momo Yaoyorozu. I came to see how you were settling into your room and if you needed anything. 1. There was no response, so the girl tried to call the prince again. 1. Prince Gown. 1. Again there was no response. 1. Prince Gown. 1. At that moment the thought crossed Momo's mind that something could have happened to the prince, and just imagining that something could have happened to the envoy from the new world who was under the care of her family would be catastrophic. 1. Prince Gown, I'm going in. the girl alerted, already worried about the current situation. The young woman with onyx eyes opened the door, and the first thing she saw was that the robe the prince was wearing was on the bed. The drawers full of clothes that the Yaoyorozu had ordered to be put in the room were open, and there was no trace of the prince. Onohe went away, the girl said to herself with terror in her voice. The Yaoyorozu family had just left the freckled boy in what would be his room for a long time. Without wasting time, the young man walked to the closet in the room and checked its contents. Finding several clothes from this world, the young man took off his robe and left it on the bed, while he put on clothes from this world, as well as a cap to hide his green hair. What the young prince wanted to do now was to get to know this world, to see it through his own eyes and learn as much as he could about it. And what better way to do that than to see how normal people in this world lived their lives? That would give him basic knowledge of this world. That way, when his experiments advance and he has more knowledge, he will focus on the people of greater social power in this world. The young prince would never tell his brothers because they would probably treat him like a child, but his plan was intended to show his father that he could work well without their support. Hopefully, if his mission went well, his father would give him more solo missions. The truth is that being the youngest son of the Sorcerer King caused his brothers and even his mother to be overprotective of him, and he wanted to show his brothers, his mother and especially his father that he already had the ability to work alone and be an irreplaceable resource for the Supreme and for the kingdom, so he would begin his mission immediately, and the first step would be to leave the mansion. He knew that the Yaoyorozu family would keep him as safe as possible, since being an envoy from their kingdom, if something happened to him his father would not be happy at all. The problem was that if he went out on the street with the security of the Yaoyorozu family, they would not give him the necessary freedom to properly investigate this world, so the best solution would be to go out alone. From what the members of the Yaoyorozu family explained to him, this world had already found out about his arrival, so he used the clothes that the Yaoyorozu family provided him in the best way to hide his physical characteristics. Luckily, he took the precaution of using an item charged with illusion magic to hide his horns, eyes and wings. So having never seen him with those parts of his body, people would be unable to recognize him by those distinctive characteristics. Once his weapon was put away and his costume was ready, the freckled man stretched his hand into the air. In front of his hand a black hole appeared in reality in which he inserted his hand. After a few seconds he withdrew his hand, in which there was now a black bracelet with a purple gem in its center. Izuku put it on his wrist and proceeded to leave the mansion. Upon opening the door to his room, the freckled man looked both ways, making sure there was no one near his room. Seeing that the hallway was clear, he carefully left the room and closed the door, finally walking towards the exit of the mansion. At the entrance there were two guards watching the entrance. One Gu Dun, the freckled man commented to himself as he took a brief look at the bracelet. "It's time to test yourself," Onehe commented to the inanimate object on his wrist. "I activate the magic contained in the bracelet." The gem in the middle began to glow a strong color, while Izuku prepared to activate the spell. "Please don't explode. Please don't explode. Please don't explode." Onehe begged the item he had crafted in whispers. When he finished his plea, he activated the magic contained in the item. Dispel 1. After activating the spell, the freckled man immediately became invisible, disappearing any trace of his existence. He knew this was a risky move. After all, he didn't know if any of the guards could have a quirk capable of seeing through magic, but at the same time, this risk was necessary if he wanted to carry out this mission. It wasn't likely they would discover him anyway. That bracelet was loaded with a spell of his own making. It wasn't the best there was, but it was strong. To find it you would need really advanced ranger-type skills or divination magic that is higher than level 6. The item he was using now was a prototype he himself had created. He called it Bracelet of the Lost. In short, it allowed him to use a spell he had created, Vanish, which allowed him to disappear. It was perfect for covert missions, and his plan was that when he finished arranging the details, give it to his father so he could give it to the infiltration, protection, espionage and assassination units of the kingdom. But for now, he thought it would be a perfect time to try this item. Upon activating it, the freckled man walked among the mansion's guards, who didn't even notice his presence. Apparently, the item worked quite well in this world. At the moment, no guard seemed to have the ability to see him or detect his presence. It only took a few minutes to leave the mansion and walk through the entire courtyard of the Yaoyorozu family home. None of the guards or servants walking through the courtyard noticed his presence. Upon reaching the enormous gates that formed the entrance to the grounds of the mansion, a limousine appeared at the exit, so the gates opened, which the prince took advantage of to leave the mansion. Well, That was easy, MHA commented to himself once outside the mansion. Once outside the mansion, he deactivated his item, becoming visible again, took off the bracelet and put it back into his storage. Once done, he proceeded to walk towards the center of the city. On his way, the young prince looked quite interested at the buildings they passed and the people walking around him. He was already very used to being surrounded by beings with different characteristics. What he found really interesting was that apparently all the beings walking beside him were humans who had evolved to the point of obtaining natural powers, although he had to admit that many of the mutated humans he saw in the streets had an enormous similarity with some of the races that inhabited his kingdom, especially humans with animal characteristics. While what surprised him most was the architecture. Apparently these humans took advantage of the land to build enormous buildings hundreds of meters high. There were buildings with the same idea in the kingdom, but none as tall as the ones he saw here, although of course all the buildings he saw on the street were small in comparison to the great architectural wonders that could be found in the kingdom, such as the Great Castle of Wisdom, the floating mansions, most of the castles in the kingdom and most of the commercial businesses in the kingdom. But still, it was interesting how the humans of this world had been able to develop to this point without possessing magic, although the appearance of quirks had probably had a contribution to their development. Another thing the prince wondered was how the governments of this world maintain constant control over the use of people's quirks. That is, thanks to the interrogation of Endeavor and the two criminals, he had been able to discover that in this world only people with a permit given by the government could use their quirks with a certain freedom, but the real question was how they keep the masses in control. After all, quirks were a part of people's nature. Denying them the ability to use the things they were born with would be the same as forcing the heteromorphs, semi-humans, and demihumans of his realm not to use their extra limbs or racial abilities. Simply doing so would cause people to eventually get tired of being repressed and rebel. He was sure there probably already existed a group with a similar ideology that could at some point cause a rebellion demanding that they allow the unregulated use of their gifts. But the real question was, why hadn't it happened yet? According to the information obtained during the interrogation, this society had been working under the same system for quite some time. There must surely be something repressing the population, and whatever it was, he had to find out what it was. After all, knowing the switch that could cause a revolt in the population will give him the option to turn it off, and he was very sure that his father would love to have control of that switch to alter it whenever he deemed necessary. During his walk, the freckled man paid special attention to the people called heroes. They were really easy to identify. You just have to look for the people with strange outfits and an air of grandeur. When he saw a hero, he analyzed their outfit and everything that could help him identify the individual's quirk. Some of them wore support equipment on their bodies, which was difficult for the freckled man to identify, but most of them didn't seem to wear support equipment, which made him wonder, if it wasn't support equipment, why did they wear such extravagant outfits? I mean, outfits like the ones he saw made them easily distinguishable in combat. Honestly, those outfits seemed really deficient in most cases. Maybe he should investigate this further. He walked down the city street, thinking about what he could see first in this world. Most likely the first thing he would need would be money to see the different places that this world had to offer, and that could only be accessed by paying. But the real problem was that he didn't know at all how currency worked in this world. He would probably need to ask someone. While the freckled boy remains distracted looking at his surroundings and the people walking through the streets, he got distracted enough to not notice a girl walking directly towards him, who also seemed distracted. Then the obvious happened and the girl collided with the freckled boy's chest, falling to the ground. With the impact, the young prince realized the situation, noticing the girl on the ground and reaching out to help her up. The girl, still lying on the ground, saw that the boy offered her a hand to get up, took his hand and used it to get up. Standing up, the freckled man could finally see the girl in front of him in more detail. She was a young woman with blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin, a happy look and glasses. I apologize for upsetting you, miss. I got distracted looking around and didn't notice your presence until it was too late. I'm very sorry for any inconvenience I may have caused you. Onehe apologized politely. The girl shook her hands in front of the boy in denial. No, it's not her fault. The truth is that I was also very distracted, she admitted while rubbing the back of her head, a little embarrassed. The freckled man shook his head respectfully. Still, I can't afford to hurt a woman and get away with it, so I ask that you allow me to apologize by offering her something to eat. One the boy asked politely. The girl shook her head. Oh, don't worry, it's not necessary, one the young woman said. The freckled man smiled in response, which surprisingly made the young blonde blush. One I insist, besides that you would also be doing me a favor. You see, I'm new in the city and I don't know the area. You would do me a big favor if you could take me to a place with good food. Onehei asked the girl. The young woman seemed a little surprised by the green-haired man's request. Well, I recently arrived in town too, but I saw a nice-looking food place back here. We could go there. One the girl commented while pointing towards one of the streets on her side. The freckled man smiled cheerfully. One that sounds nice. If you would be so kind, it might be a good time to introduce ourselves, Onehei told the girl. The blonde teen's blush increased slightly as she realized she had forgotten to introduce herself. Oneohon, she showed a half-blushed smile that made her look cute. I'm sorry, I forgot. Onehei extended his hand towards the freckled man, in an attempt to simulate a restart of their conversation. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Melissa Shieldone, he said to her with a smile. The freckled man responded to the girl's offer with a strong but friendly squeeze. Nice to meet you, Shield-san. My name is Isizuku Ooal Gown, one he said proudly as he mentioned her name, although the young American woman let that last bit go unnoticed. Melissa looked at him with an even bigger smile than before. Oni, a pleasure, Gown Sanon. After that brief introduction, both teenagers walked towards the place the blonde girl had indicated, which was a cafeteria. When they arrived, they both entered, sat at a table and made their orders. While they waited, they both sat down and began talking to each other. So Shield-san, you said you don't live in the city, so where are you from? The freckled one was the one who started the conversation. My father is a researcher at Islandone. The girl seemed to feel proud when she mentioned her father. Izuku could identify with that feeling. You should know about the door that appeared in Musudafu Forestone, the girl commented to him. Yeah, I think I heard something about that. It was the freckled man's sour response. The blonde nodded. Well, the Japanese government called my dad to have some tests done on the door and he was really excited about that. Imagine it, a door to a completely different world opened up in the middle of the forest. We even made contact with a completely new civilization. The girl said, very excited. Lion, this is very exciting. She told the freckled boy, acting like a little girl in a candy store, which the freckled boy actually found adorable. Adone, the green-haired prince, paused briefly before continuing. The unknown gives true excitement to life. Onehei told the girl one of the phrases he vaguely remembered from the Supreme Scriptures. If he wasn't mistaken, it was the Supreme being Genjiro who said that. The girl smiled with understanding. Onate's true, his previously lively and somewhat childish attitude suddenly changed to a more serious, though still seemingly cheerful, one. My father thinks that the other side could be completely different from ours. He believes that even the laws of physics that govern that world could be different. Onehei said before letting out a sigon. If only we could go to the other side. Unfortunately, from what my dad told me, since the civilization on the other side took control of the gate, they don't allow anyone to cross it. It's very sad. It would be easier for my dad if he could collect data from both sides of the gate. The girl commented with a strong disappointment in her voice. The freckled man looked at her with understanding. Well, who knows? While the freckled man was saying that, the waitress arrived with their orders, so the freckled man started stirring his coffee while he spoke. Maybe the relationship between both sides will improve at some point and they will be allowed to pass. Onehei said this knowing that according to his plans it would not happen soon. The girl seemed to cheer up at this hopeful, though false, promise. That would be amazing. If I could go to the other side, I would love to explore, learn their culture, their history, their civilization. She said almost as if she were daydreaming. Unfortunately, nobody knows almost anything about what is on the other side, Onehei commented at the end. The prince took a sip of his coffee before beginning to speak. They didn't say that a hero crossed the portal, the one who caused the fire in the village. He told his companion in an attempt to gather information about what happened to that man after his men handed him over to the fortress. Melissa seemed annoyed at the mention of that man. Are you talking about Endeavor? Onehei made an annoying clicking noise with his tongue after saying that name. One, it is regrettable. Because of his actions the relations between both sides are very tense, and the worst thing is that they say that Endeavor does not remember anything of what he saw on the other side. Apparently he suffers from amnesia caused by an unknown source. Onehe said to his companion, not even trying to hide the annoyance in his voice. One, and for a moment we thought that mind-altering magic could be nullified by a quirk. Apparently it's effective so far. Onehe commented to himself inside his mind. One, it just is. One, the girl said, pausing briefly to take a sip of her milkshake. One, frustrating one, he said at the end of his sentence. One, I guess. One, the freckled man commented calmly. One, it seems we're done eating. One, the freckled man commented, drawing the attention of his companion. One, would you like to continue our conversation while we take a short walk? One, the freckled boy asked respectfully. Usually the blonde would refuse to go out with someone she didn't know, but there was something about this boy, something different that made it impossible for her to refuse. One, sounds like Funonehe said with a smile, after which he took his wallet out of his purse. One, just let me pay my share, Onehe said as he began to search his wallet for the necessary money. Before the girl could take out a single coin, the freckled man placed his hand over hers, causing the girl to shudder, stopping her search. One, no, I offered to pay. Don't worry. Onehe told the freckled man before the girl could ask him the reason for his actions. On you're sure? One, she asked, unsure about allowing a stranger to pay for her food. One, yes, no problem. Wait for me at the door while I pay. One, the freckled man told her calmly, and for some strange reason, once again the girl was unable to say no to the freckled man. With a brief nod in response, the girl got up from the table and headed for the exit of the establishment. When the young woman with blonde hair was out of sight and making sure no one was looking, she surreptitiously opened her dimensional storage and took out a small, finely decorated sack. He opened the sack, which when opened showed that inside were several gold coins and several different types of gems. He extracted a small ruby that he left on the table, then he put the small sack inside his pants pocket, after which he got up and left the premises, where his companion was waiting for him. One, are you tired? One, I ask only as a confirmation. The freckled man gave him a slight nod. One, leave the payment on the table. I just hope it's a Nugon. After saying that sentence he rubbed the back of his head with a little embarrassment. Oname not really familiar with the value of Japanese currency. Onehe explained to the girl, who only gave him a kind smile in response. One, I don't think there will be any problems. One, it was the girl's kind response. Both teenagers walked away from the establishment, unaware that the waitress inside had fainted upon seeing the ruby they had left as payment. During their walk, the two teenagers chatted a bit. Melissa told him about her father's job and her life on Island, while the freckled boy chose to avoid answering personal questions. After a few minutes of walking, they arrived at a place where a large group of people were surrounding an area from which loud sounds, like explosions, could be heard. The freckled man looked at the area where the people gathered with curiosity. One, and so? Onehe asked his companion with confusion in his tone of voice. One, it seems that he is a villain. The girl answered him simply. The freckled man saw the group of civilians gathered with confusion. One, I don't understand. The peculiar comment. The blonde-haired girl turned her gaze to look at him. One, people should stay away. Why do they gather around the villain? One, I didn't understand why the humans of this world seemed to lack the instinct to flee from danger. That was a basic instinct for survival. Melissa looked at him confused after that question. One, what are you talking about? They just want to see the fight between the heroes and the villain. One, I explain it to him as if it were the most normal thing in the world. One, I don't understand. According to the interrogation, the duty of heroes is to protect people. Why do they make a spectacle of their jobs? Onehe commented to himself in his mind, after which he let out a mental sigh. One, well, at least this will serve to see and analyze the quirks of the heroes that are there. One, that thought was just a sort of consolation victory. I really hated not understanding things. One, Shield San, would you mind going to see the heroes? I'm kind of curious. One, I ask you with respect and kindness. The young blonde nodded calmly. One, sure, it could be interesting. One, that was all he said in reply. Both teenagers walked through the crowd of people watching the situation that was taking place. When they reached the front, both young people were able to see the situation that was developing. Seeing what was happening, the blonde girl covered her mouth in horror. while the freckled one only saw what was happening with extreme coldness and some curiosity. In front of them, a villain with a quirk that turned his body into a kind of green liquid, held a blonde teenager hostage, who seemed to be suffocating since the villain covered the teenager's mouth and nose while next to them, the heroes remained still, limiting themselves to keeping the civilians at bay. The freckled man saw this situation with interest. One interesting, that guy's quirk seems to allow him to turn into a slime-like being, and not only that. Onehe paused as he watched the being insert its liquid body into its hostage's mouth. It seems that by inserting his body into his victim's mouth, he gives him some control over his body. The teenager used an explosion again to keep the heroes at bay. It seems he is controlling the explosions with which he keeps these heroes at bay. Onehe smiled, interested in the peculiar ability in front of him. Quite interesting, that villain would make a great test subject. Onehe commented to himself inside his mind without paying much attention to the young man in front of him whose life was threatened. At one point the blonde teenager turned his gaze in the direction where the civilians were watching him. His eyes showed terror, the desire to be rescued. Seeing him, the hero's hearts sank for not being able to do anything to help him. The civilians felt pity for the young man. An extremely thin blonde man with a sunken gaze just clenched his fist tightly in helplessness. The freckled man just saw the look with disinterest, but the reaction of one person in the crowd was completely different. Seeing that look, Melissa didn't know why or when, but she started running in the direction of the blonde teenager, dodging the heroes who tried to stop her and running directly towards the villain. The freckled blinked, surprised at the surprising outcome. What is he supposed to be doing? It was the first thought that crossed his mind when he realized the surprising action of his companion. One of the heroes wearing a blue suit with a wooden mask stretched his arm towards the young blonde in an attempt to stop her. No, stop, don't go. Unfortunately for the man, he was unable to stop the girl in time. What are you doing? Death Arms shouted in a mixture of annoyance and confusion. While at the back of the crowd, an extremely thin blonde man with sunken eyes watched with enormous terror as the blonde teenager ran with all her might towards danger. Bomb! The thin man screamed in terror. Once the surprise had passed, the freckled boy's mind calmed down again, calmly watching the events unfolding in front of him, his mind prioritizing thinking about what the quirk of the girl was that at that moment he regretted not having asked. Could it be that he has a quirk that can easily finish off the villain? The different gifts the girl could have at her disposal made the freckled man excited. I hope it is interesting, Onehe thought at the end with a terrifying smile on his face. The youngest member of the Shield family didn't stop to think about what he was doing. The truth is, he didn't even understand why he was doing it. He didn't even know that boy, but seeing his look, pleading for help, terrified, he couldn't help but start running. As he ran, he thought about how to help the boy, analyzing the villain's liquid body, trying to find a weakness that he could exploit. When he saw his body, he noticed that everything was liquid except for his eyes, which meant that his possible weakness was his eyes. Melissa quickly grabbed a piece of debris left over from the explosions that had occurred there and threw it with all her strength at the villain's eyes, causing him to writhe in pain. Taking advantage of the villain's brief confusion, the blonde-haired girl ran and with her hands tried to remove the mud that covered the teenager's mouth and nose, with desperate movements, almost scratching the mud. For a moment the blonde teenager's mouth and nose were uncovered. What the hell are you doing, blonde? You're going to get yourself killed. Far from thanking him for the help he received, the ash-blonde boy stuck in the mud responded angrily. The girl gave a nervous smile. She tried to imitate her uncle Might, but the nervousness of the situation made her smile become shaky. "I'm sorry, it's just that when I saw you, I noticed in your eyes that you were begging for help." That was all the answer the girl could give. Hearing that, the ash-blonde boy was surprised, although that didn't stop his pride from being hurt when he saw this girl trying to save him. Meanwhile, Izuku just stood there watching the girl desperately try to free the blonde teenager. What is he supposed to be doing? I thought he'd have a quirk that could somehow negate that villain's quirk or that explosion guy's quirk, but all he does is run around like crazy with no apparent plan. The freckled man said mentally, after which he shook his head, somewhat disappointed by the girl's actions. That's really stupid. The freckled man saw how the liquid-bodied villain raised one of the tentacles that came out of his body with the intention of ending the life of the young blonde. Seeing this, the young prince thought for a moment about helping her, but before he could do anything, a huge figure moved at great speed. raising dust in the place where Melissa and the villain were. When the smoke cleared, the freckled man saw something that really caught his attention. Protecting his companion from the villain's attack was a man about 2.5 meters tall, blonde hair combed into 2 long spikes that rose to the sky, enormous muscles and a big smile on his face. At that moment, that man said a few words in a very low tone. Words that no human could hear at this distance, but luckily for the freckled man, being a hybrid of undead and demon, he had much better senses than any human, so it was quite easy for him to hear that man's words. One pathetic, I am really pathetic, words that didn't really fit the situation. The prince had no idea who this man was, but judging by the reactions of the people around him, that guy seemed to be someone famous. All the people around him were repeating the same thing with a tone of surprise and admiration in their voice, All Might. Well, apparently that guy's name was All Might, but judging by the tone the people around him were using, the man must have been one of those so-called heroes, and judging by the admiration people had for him, it was likely that he was an especially powerful or famous hero. Suddenly the blonde man launched a powerful blow against the mud villain. The blow generated a powerful air current that destroyed the villain and saved Melissa and the other blonde guy. The powerful air current resulting from the attack of the blonde hero altered the air pressure and caused a rain to start, which began to put out the fires that the explosions caused by the blonde boy had caused all over the place. The freckled man's eyes were wide open and his mouth agape. That blow had been too powerful. In fact, he didn't expect to see something like that. That someone could change the air pressure and cause rain with a blow was something quite surprising. It was then that Isizuku began to hear the comments of the people around him. Most of them were comments of surprise and admiration, but one caught his attention, how they called that man the #1 hero. He knew that the man Neuronist had interrogated in his kingdom identified himself as the hero who was in the top 2. In other words, the second most powerful hero. If these people said that All Might was the #1 hero of Japan, he was probably also the most powerful hero that this country could offer. That was of quite a bit of interest to Isizuku. A few moments passed when Isizuku saw that the people the Yaoyorozu family had told him were reporters approached and surrounded All Might. Seeing this, he simply thought of going to Melissa to ask her about this All Might. He slowly approached the girl who was still sitting on the ground. When he got to her, he ran into something he didn't expect to see. The professional heroes were scolding Melissa for some reason. You can't do such irresponsible things, girl. The muscular hero in a light blue suit told him. They could have killed you, said the blonde heroine in a tight suit. The next to speak was the hero in the wooden mask. If you had waited a little, we would have saved the boy. After saying those words to Melissa, he turned his attention away from the girl and directed it this time to the blonde boy who had been the villain's hostage. But you were very brave, Onehe said to the boy who seemed to ignore his words. And with a quirk like that, I hope to see you at my agency when you graduate from the academy. Death Arms continued with the praise. While this was happening, without anyone noticing, a figure slowly approached until it was behind the heroes. Shield-san, I was looking for you, are you okay? The freckled man said to the girl once he stood next to her. Both the heroes and Bakugo and Melissa were surprised to hear the voice behind them. Instantly the heroes turned to run into a freckled teenager who was watching the situation. Gown Sanone the blonde said in surprise. Yeah, I feel fine. Onehe said kindly. The freckled man smiled at that statement. Excellent. Onehe extended his hand to help the girl up. In that case, can we continue with the walk? Onehe asked politely. Before they could move, Kamui Woods stepped between them. Wait a minute, boy, we haven't finished scolding her yet. The hero said to the freckled one. The young inventor lowered her head, a little sad about the situation. Gown-san, why don't you continue the walk without me? She told him somewhat depressed. The freckled man shook his head. Just ignore these guys and let's move on. Onehe said, continuing to stretch his open hand towards the girl. The heroine named Mount Lady again intervened in the freckled man's request. Sorry kid, we can't just leave the girl like nothing happened after that. Onehe said to the freckled man seriously. Isizuku ignored the woman trying to stop them. In my opinion, Shield-san has already learned his lesson. Now, if you'll allow me, I'd rather continue our walk than stay here listening to your hypocrisy, Onehe said coldly. Kamui Woods looked confused and somewhat annoyed by the boy's words. Hypocrisy. The freckled one nodded. Of course, They scold the only person who had the courage to do something about the situation and praise the hostage as if he had something to do with the defeat of the slime man. One the freckled man told them as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Hearing that the heroes got a little upset, Melissa was surprised and Bakugo was boiling with anger inside. One do you say that his actions were correct? One Death Arms said between annoyed grunts Onehe could have killed himself. Onehe answered the freckled one. The prince nodded at the man's words, unable to deny what he had said. Oname not going to lie, what he did was stupid. Attacking a person you're not physically superior to without an apparent plan is an invitation to death. Onehe told everyone, causing Melissa to lower her head sadly again. Mount Lady tried to continue hitting the boy's arguments one and then why. One but she was quickly silenced as the freckled man continued his tirade. One Buton Melissa raised her head when she heard the freckled man continue. One in my opinion, the weak who tries to do something to help in a lost situation has more courage than the strong who does not act out of fear. Onehe responded by quoting the Supreme Scriptures once again, this time quoting the words of the Supreme being warrior Takemikazuchi. Kamui Woods was beginning to get annoyed, as were the rest of the heroes, by the boy's words. One you say we were afraid. Onehe said while trying to maintain his composure. The prince nodded without any fear of upsetting the heroes. One precisely from what I saw, none of you had any intention of doing anything, a few more minutes and the boy would be dead Onehe explained simply. One we can't act or the villain would. One Death Arms tried to defend himself, explaining the reason for his inaction, but was interrupted almost immediately by the freckled man. One if he didn't act, the boy would be dead. Although Shield San couldn't save him, his actions bought him the time needed for All Might to arrive and save them both. From my point of view, if it weren't for Shield San, the boy would be dead, one the freckled one explained. Before anyone could say anything else, Izuku walked up to Melissa, took her hand and helped her stand up. As they both walked away, one of the heroes in the group decided to say one more thing. Don't today's brats no longer respect heroes, one MT lady said with annoyance. The freckled prince paused for a moment upon hearing the heroine's words. One I believe that a true hero must earn his title with actions, the fact that anyone can obtain that title makes possessing it irrelevant. One after saying those strong words, the prince walked away, dragging Melissa by the hand with him. After saying that he left the heroes speechless and surprised all the civilians and reporters who had seen this interaction and even the reporters who had been recording it were left speechless. It even surprised All Might who was talking to some reporters when he realized the exchange of words. They both walked for a few minutes in silence, until finally Melissa prepared to break it. One thanks for standing up for me back there. One the girl thanked the freckled man. The green-haired man nodded in response. One I just said what I think on it was the simple and kind answer he gave to the girl. Before either of them could say anything else, several vehicles appeared on the scene surrounding both teenagers. The vehicles opened and from them several men in suits got out surrounding the place. After a few seconds in which Melissa was very confused, a limousine parked in front of the street. One of the men in suits walked up to the limousine and opened its door, from which a well-shaped teenager with jet black hair combed in a ponytail and dark eyes got out of the limousine. Melissa noticed that the teenager seemed upset. The raven-haired teenager stopped in front of both young men, showing an annoyed expression that made Melissa nervous, who was beginning to believe that this girl was her companion's girlfriend, who was a powerful girl who had come to get revenge on her for being with her boyfriend. Maybe she should stop reading so much shoujo manga. Unlike the young blonde who felt nervous about the situation, the freckled man only had a calm smile on his face. One Yaoyorozu-san, I see you found me pretty quickly. One the freckled man said calmly. His hostess did not seem to take the situation as calmly as he did, appearing considerably annoyed. Onhis little show in front of the cameras helped a lot. One SHE told him quite irritated. The freckled man nodded with understanding. One I see one that was all the answer he gave on the matter. This time the young Yaoyorozu turned her gaze to the blonde girl who accompanied the prince. One could you tell me who she is? Onehe asked sternly. Oni a girl I met on my walk, one said the freckled one. Momo looked at him irritated by his answer. Onehe calls escaping from the mansion without any security a walk. First of all, how did he manage to get out of the mansion without being seen? One SHE asked exasperatedly. The green-haired young man smiled cockily as he moved his hands in front of the girl's face as if he were putting on some kind of street show. One Magicone. His unserious response only increased the girl's irritation. Just one. It was clear that he didn't believe the magic explanation, taking it as an excuse or a bad joke. But why escape in the first place? If he wanted to leave he could have told me. Onei claimed it. I thought it would be better to see the city on my own. It was the freckled man's response. Excuse me. They both turned to look at the blonde girl from whom that nervous word had come. What's going on? The girl asked, completely confused by the situation unfolding before her eyes. Momo looked at the freckled man seriously. Does she know? Asked. The freckled one didn't know one. The blonde girl looked even more confused. Know what? Every moment that passed, this conversation became more difficult for the girl to follow. The freckled man approached the young blonde, ready to explain himself. Sorry for the little lie, Melissa. Please allow me to introduce myself properly. The freckled man said as he placed his hand on his abdomen in an elegant pose. My name is Isizuku Ooal Gown, the one your reporters have called the prince from another world. Onei explained the freckled one to him. The blonde woman was confused, until she suddenly understood what the freckled man was saying. Prince. Wait, are you the prince of another world? She asked in surprise. The prince rubbed the back of his head casually. Yeah, sorry for not telling you. I thought you'd treat me differently if you knew. It was the best lie he could come up with to cover up the fact that he'd been using her. Momo shook her head, not at all amused by the situation in front of her. In any case we have to return to the mansion. Please get into the limousine. Prince Gaonan. From the tone of voice the girl used, it was clear to the freckled man that he had no choice in the matter. Yes, Onei said calmly as he walked to the limousine. Before getting in he saw his companion for the last time. It was fun. Shield-san. I hope we can do it again someday, Onei said, after which he waved goodbye. Without saying anything else, the prince got into the limousine with the young millionaire and they drove away, followed by the bodyguards in their cars. Behind them they left a surprised Melissa, who mentally blamed herself for not asking the freckled man questions about her world. On a quiet street a convoy of several black vehicles was seen. A group of 4 cars surrounded and protected a limousine. Inside the limousine, sitting in the back seats, 2 teenagers were silent. The first was a young man with green hair and emerald eyes, while the second teenager was a young woman with jet black hair combed in a ponytail, who had 2 onyx-colored eyes. If eyes could kill, the green-haired teenager would have died at least a dozen times. The raven-haired teenager had an accusatory gaze fixed directly on the freckled man's neck, who was only looking outside through the limousine window. Although it seemed that he was unaware of the accusatory gaze directed at him, he had realized that a long time ago. He was just waiting for the right moment to speak. Eyes, something wrong, Miss Yaoyorozu. I think you've been staring at me for a while now, Onei said to the girl without taking his gaze off the window. The young woman responded, really annoyed with the green-haired young man. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused me? My family is in charge of you during your stay in Japan. If something were to happen to you on our watch, we'd be in huge trouble, and relations between our countries would worsen. I reproached the girl. The freckled man watched her with a carefree look on his face. It's not that bad, I just went for a walk, Onei answered the girl as if it was no big deal. It's not that big a deal. The furious girl yelled at him. Do you have any idea what would have happened to my family if something happened to you under our care? The girl responded, really annoyed. Calm down, Miss Yaoyorozu, the freckled one asked him. The girl let out a sigh of annoyance at the freckled man's words. First of all, why did he go out alone? What did he plan to do in a world he didn't know? Onei questioned the prince in an attempt to find out his motives. I just wanted to see this world, the prince said. Onei could have warned me to prepare an escort. The young heiress reproached him. The freckled man looked at the young woman with a bit of seriousness in his gaze. If you were to accompany me, Miss Yaoyorozu, you would have taken me to only the pleasant places in your world, and I really wish to see every aspect of this world, not just the good ones. Momo let out a sigh to calm her annoyance. It just can't be on, she commented quietly to herself, but was easily heard by the freckled man. Listen, Gaon-san, I know you're curious to see our world, but please remember that you're a person of interest and there are many people who won't be as kind as we are. so if you plan on going out, please let me know. One the girl asked him, this time choosing to use a friendlier tone of voice. The freckled one nodded. One I understand and apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused, and I'll be sure to let you know next time I want to go for a walk. One the freckled man promised him kindly. The young woman smiled at the answer. One glad to hear it, by the way, how was the walk? One the girl asked, this time calmer. The freckled man was about to answer when he noticed in the window of the brunette, her limousine was passing through an intersection and he noticed the street that was on the side of where they were passing. Then he saw it, a huge black vehicle driving quickly towards their direction. It was obvious that it was going to hit them and it seemed that it wasn't even trying to slow down or change direction, so it could be on purpose. One careful, one the freckled man admitted the moment he realized the danger. In a quick movement, the prince moved his body and placed himself on top of the young brunette, who was extremely confused by the prince's actions, but then she noticed the car heading in her direction, so she closed her eyes and waited for the impact. The huge black vehicle hit the limousine causing it to flip over on the ground. As soon as this happened, Momo's guards who were in the other vehicles got out of their cars and used them as cover while they took out guns and pointed them at the people in the truck that had flipped the limousine. The Yaoyorozu family's guards began to shoot at the attackers, but before they could react, 5 people got out of the van and like a well-trained machine, they took out weapons and fired. They were accurate shots to the guards' heads, which caused them to die instantly. It was obvious that the attackers were well-trained. Once they finished with the guards they quickly approached the limousine, hurrying to finish their mission before the heroes arrived. Meanwhile inside the limousine both teenagers began to move. Izuku had used his body to protect the young brunette, so she took most of the impact. Luckily no glass from her window had embedded itself in her back. She only had some bumps and bruises that were covered by the clothes she was wearing. When the young Yaoyorozu realized this she immediately became worried. It can't be. Gaon-san, are you okay? One the girl asked, worried about the prince's health. One yes, it's just a few bumps, it's nothing to worry about Yaoyorozu-san, the freckled man said calmly to calm the girl. The freckled boy moved to the side, giving Momo space to move. Then they heard gunshots coming from outside. Momo immediately identified the noises, although the freckled boy wasn't sure what it was. One what is that noise? One the freckled man asked the girl. One shots one Momo replied with a tone of concern in her voice. The freckled man seemed confused by the word own shots. Onehe asked, seeking clarification. One it is the sound that a weapon of this world generates, and the young Yaoyorozu explained to Himon they killed the guardsman, the girl said as she looked out the window. One what do we do? One I asked the freckled man who was really worried about his situation. The prince adopted a serious look. On you stay here, I'll take care of these guys, Onehe said as he positioned himself to get out of the limo. The green-haired prince was about to get out of the car when he felt Momo's hand tug at his clothes, stopping him. One wait. You can't go out, it would be very dangerous. One the girl told him, worried about his well-being. The freckled man smiled calmly. Don't worry, I may not look like it, but I am very strong. One it was the answer that the freckled man gave him. The brunette was going to stop him. She couldn't let anything happen to him. If something happened to the prince it would be a huge problem for his family, but before she could say anything else, she saw something that left her stunned. The prince extended his hand into the air as if he wanted to grab something. Then Momo saw something that should have been impossible. A black hole in reality opened in front of the freckled man's hand, who introduced his hand into that hole of pure darkness. A few seconds later he withdrew his hand from the hole, but his hand was no longer empty. Now he held a beautiful sword with a golden handle and a pure silver blade. The wealthy young woman was shocked. That shouldn't be possible. Her mind worked quickly in search of an explanation. Then she thought of the only thing that according to her would explain what she had just seen, a quirk. Was that possible? Perhaps there were also quirks in the prince's world. From what the world knew, the prince came from a world that seemed to have a technological level similar to the Middle Ages, but from what he had just seen, did the humans on the other side also have quirks? Oneth that's a quirk, one the girl asked in surprise. The freckled man shook his head. Onate's not thought. Onehe paused, then showed a smug smile. Onate's magic one it was the answer the prince gave him. Magic. That was absurd. Magic wasn't real. The only ones who would believe in an explanation like that would be small children. The mere thought that magic was real would be completely absurd. One magic does not exist, the girl answered him. At this point the freckled man only paid minimal attention to the girl, choosing to focus his attention on his attackers. One may be in your world, but in mine it is not like that. In fact, magic is very common where I come from, Onehe explained distractedly. Momo felt like her head was about to explode from all the information she was receiving right now. Magic is real? That's impossible. What the green-haired prince was telling her was that he came from a fantasy world in which anyone who reads light novels or watches fantasy anime would want to live. What's next? Now he would tell her that in his world there are also dragons, goblins, elves and all kinds of magical creatures. That was simply ridiculous. She wanted to argue, explain to the freckled man that magic didn't exist, and especially prevent him from going out to fight 5 men with guns, armed only with a sword. His chances of winning were very low. The girl was about to speak when one of the armed men stopped right in front of them. Come on, young prince, if you come with us without resisting we won't hurt the girl. What do you say? Our boss just wants to talk to you. The man said arrogantly, heading inside the limousine. While listening to the gunman speak, the freckled man adopted a fighting pose from inside the overturned vehicle. What makes you think I'll go with you voluntarily? The freckled man asked. The man widened his arrogant smile. Because you have no choice, Onehe said dryly. If I have one, the freckled man answered him. Yeah, which one? The mercenary asked rhetorically, mocking the prince. This one. It was the cold response of the freckled man. It was at that moment that the man got close enough to the overturned limousine. The prince delivered a powerful thrust through the glass that separated him from the villain. The tip of the sword pierced the attacker's neck, who fell to the ground choking on his blood. The young raven girl felt scared and surprised. She saw it, the moment the prince killed that man. He didn't even blink. There was no fear, doubt or regret in his gaze. His eyes only showed the purest indifference. She couldn't believe that someone who looked as innocent as him was capable of killing someone in cold blood like that. Please wait here, Yaoyorozu-san. I will take care of eliminating the attackers. Do not leave until I tell you it is safe. Onehe ordered the girl. The young woman was still stunned by seeing the freckled man kill someone in cold blood, so she said and did nothing when the prince crashed through the broken window of the limo and stepped outside. Once outside, the green-haired man observed the 4 men who had attacked them, while they saw the inert body of their companion at the prince's feet. Damn kid. One of the villains shouted angrily in the distance. The freckled man saw them with confusion. I don't understand what you're upset about. You killed Yaoyorozu-san's guards. If you take lives, don't be upset if someone else takes them from you. Onehe answered simply. The men were clearly upset by the situation. The villain increased his grip on his weapon. I'm going to kill him, Onehe said as he looked at the freckled man. The one who appeared to be the leader of the group stopped him. USE tranquilizer guns, we were hired to take him alive. Onehe ordered his subordinates. The men obeyed the order and from his waist he took out a tranquilizer gun, pointed it at the freckled man and fired. The shot was going directly to the prince's neck, but just before the tranquilizer embedded itself in his neck, the green-haired prince made a quick movement and with his sword blocked the tranquilizer centimeters before it embedded itself in his neck. Everyone present was surprised, and at that moment some civilians began to approach, seeing the situation and starting to call out to the heroes and police in the area. I guess there is no other option. Onehe commented to himself, after which he started running towards the attackers with his sword ready to execute them. 1. Martial art. Pulse acceleration martial art. Greater speed increase martial art. Swift step martial art. Thought acceleration martial art. Superior reflex martial art. Greater speed of thought. Onehe began to activate his martial arts. With each of the phrases he said, a kind of light illuminated Izuku's body, and when it disappeared it left a bright aura on his body. He decided to use martial arts for his fight. He could use magical buffs on himself for greater effect, but buffs of level 3 and lower would not have a very strong effect on him, and as his father ordered him, he should not use magic higher than level 3, so his best option was to use martial arts. The prince began to run quickly towards the 4 remaining attackers, who began to shoot at the freckled man, who used his sword to block all the shots before the eyes of the attackers and the civilians who had just gathered around him. When Izuku got close enough to the nearest attacker, he activated a new attack to eliminate his enemy. 1. Martial art. 6 cuts of light. Onehe screamed with his back raised in the air. After saying that, Izuku lowered his sword directly towards the man's body. As he did so, from the tip of his sword came out 6 lights in the form of cuts that crossed the attacker's body. A few seconds passed in which the attacker did not move, but suddenly his body separated into thin pieces, filling the ground with blood, indicating that the cuts of light had crossed him. Complete lion shit, he already killed 2 of ours. One said. One of the villains, seeing the situation in front of him, he looked away to address his bosun. What do we do? One asked. The leader of the group gritted his teeth in anger. They had been told that they wanted the boy alive, but if things continued like this, he would lose all his men before capturing him. One, you have to capture him alive. If you think you are under serious threat, use your quirks to defend yourself or resort to lethal force. 1. If they did that, they could potentially kill the boy, but they didn't have many options in the current situation. 1. The 2 men who were left said at the same time. They continued with their shots while the freckled man ran towards them using his sword to block their shots. He quickly ran until he reached the next of the closest robbers. When he got close enough, he tried to cut his enemy again with his sword, but before doing so, the man activated what seemed to be his quirk. Suddenly the attacker's body was surrounded by a large amount of flames, which emitted intense heat, forcing the freckled man to retreat. Oh, I'm so sorry, brat, but you won't be able to kill me as easily as you did those 2. After all. Onehe paused briefly as the flames grew in intensity. One, you can't cut what you can't touch, Onehe said arrogantly to the freckled man. The prince smiled at this guy's comment. He could certainly resist the common fire this guy generated quite well, but there were much more effective ways to deal with him. He pointed the palm of his hand towards the man and activated his magic. 1. Maximize magic. Magic arrow. 1. In front of the freckled man's outstretched hand, a kind of energy began to gather until it formed a kind of floating energy spear. It was yellow in color and hovered in the air. Suddenly, the freckled man made a movement with his hand and the arrow shot out toward the attacker, piercing his chest and killing him. No one knew what it was. Was it a quirk? No one present had ever seen a quirk that could do things like that. Before anyone else could react, the prince ran until he was in front of another of the attackers. He tried to throw a slash at his stomach, but the man jumped in the air, dodging the slash. The freckled man tried to cut him while he was in the air, but the man activated his quirk and an air platform appeared under his feet, which he used to dodge the slash. Jumping behind the prince, he tried to hit him, but the freckled man moved quickly to the side, dodging the blow. Izuku spun to try to cut him, but a surface of air appeared between his enemy and his sword, blocking his attack. I'm sorry, kid, but you won't be able to get through my defense. Surrender and we promise to treat you carefully. 1. The man promised. The freckled man looked at the villain seriously. 1. Giving in to someone like you would be a huge disappointment to my father. 1. After saying those words, he increased the strength of his grip on his sword due to the anger of thinking about that. 1. Death is preferable to failing one's father. 1. Is that your final decision? 1. The man asked. In response, the freckled man gave him a brief note. So don't blame me for what happens. 1. The man took out his gun again and began to shoot the freckled man continuously, who continued to block the shots with his sword, trying to get closer and cut his enemy, but whenever he got close enough, his opponent created an air barrier blocking his attack. While they were fighting, he came up with a plan. He extended his hand towards his enemy, who was covering himself with several air barriers, and used a spell on Vine Prison. 1. The freckled man recited the spell. In the same place where the attacker was standing, the concrete on the ground broke and several vines came out of it that trapped the attacker's limbs, leaving him immobile. At that moment he lost his concentration, deactivating his quirk, so he didn't notice when the prince passed by him with his sword extended. A few seconds passed before his head separated from his body, killing him instantly. Before he could make another move, he felt a sting on his neck. He brought his hand to the place where he felt it and extracted one of the sedatives, which had been shot by the last of the attackers, who was terrified to see that the sedative had had no effect on the prince. The lack of effect of the anesthetic was due to the fact that since the freckled man was a hybrid between a succubus and an overlord, he had an almost complete resistance to drugs. The attacker, seeing the green-haired man run in his direction, took out his normal gun and began to shoot with the intention of killing him, but he continued to protect himself from the bullets with his sword. When he got close enough, the attacker used his quirk, turning his arm into a stabbing weapon in an attempt to block the freckled man's weapon. His sword and his arm collided. Then the attacker saw how his still transformed arm separated from his body and fell to the ground. 1AHHH. The man screamed in pain as he looked at the stump where his arm used to be. He knelt on the ground as he held his arm in pain. 1AHHH. My arm. My arm. Onehe screamed on the ground as he watched in terror as the prince slowly approached him. Get away from me. Don't come near me. Have mercy. Onehe screamed as he crawled backward in a desperate attempt to get away from the freckled man. The prince ignored his pleas, walking slowly towards him. Mercy. Your scum who attacked us without provocation, hurt Yaoyorozu-san, and killed her guards. Onehe's expression changed to one filled with anger. For scum like you, there is no mercy. Onehe gave his final judgment on the man as he raised his sword to execute him. The prince raised his sword in the air with the intention of giving the fatal blow to his attacker. He saw the face of his enemy. It was full of tears and nasal fluid running down his face. That disgusted the freckled man. At least scum like this should accept their end with dignity. He thought that this guy would please Neuronist. In any case, it would be better to end this. He was about to lower his sword and give the finish to this guy, when suddenly his body was surrounded by a large amount of branches that immobilized him. A group of people that the freckled man had ignored until now appeared in his field of vision. He had seen these guys before. They were the same hypocrites who had been scolding Melissa for trying to save that blonde-haired boy. Although there was someone he hadn't seen before, it was a man wearing some kind of silver full-body armor with strange tubes coming out of the armor's arms. Stop. You are under arrest for homicide. Said the man in the blue suit with the wooden mask. The hero in the silver armor don't move, villain. Onehe told him before paying attention to the man that the freckled man had amputated his arm. Call an ambulance. Onehe called on the other heroes and police officers who had gathered. The freckled man looked confused. Villain. I don't understand what you're talking about. These guys crashed our car, killed our guards, and tried to kidnap me. I just defended myself. Onehe explained to the members of the peace enforcement forces. Death Arms approached the annoying freckled man. You didn't have to kill them all. That's murder, plus you used your quirk, which is illegal, Onehe said as he pointed his huge finger directly at the freckled man's face. Mount Lady stared at the freckled man with narrowed eyes. Momentonish said when she recognized the freckled man, pointing at him with her finger in surprise. I know you. You're the brat who called us hypocrites. She told the others in surprise. I knew that brat had problems. Death Arms said through gritted teeth. In any case, you are under arrest. We will take you to the nearest police station for processing. Said the hero in silver armor with the tubes in his arms. The group of heroes were about to take Izuku away when a female voice interrupted them. One Momentone Momo called them when she finally managed to get out of the limo. They can't take it away, Onehe told them, stopping theme. Onehe has diplomatic immunity, Onehe said as he handed the heroes some papers he took out of his bag. The three heroes began to read the documents. They were actually very surprised that this teenager who had just killed 4 men and left one seriously injured, had diplomatic immunity, which meant that they could not touch him. What is this? Death Arms asked. This document doesn't even indicate the country of origin, so is it fake? Kamui Woods asked the rest of the heroes and the Raven Girl. Onight's real Ingenium said, really surprised when I just confirmed it through the intercom. That document was issued to the visitor on the other side. Onehe told the rest of the heroes present, very impressed. Wow. You say that Brad is the prince of the other world? MT lady asked, impressed. The freckled man smiled with some arrogance. Let me introduce myself. The freckled man made a small bow. My name is Isizuku Ooal Gown. I am a prince from the nation on the other side of the Gate, Onehe told the heroes. Death Arms approached angrily. I don't care if you're royalty. Onehe said between angry growls as he pointed at the corpses scattered around the area. You shouldn't have killed them, that's wrong. Onehe yelled at the freckled prince. The freckled man shrugged his shoulders. I really don't understand what's wrong with what I did. Onehe explained simply. Don't you see anything wrong with killing? Doesn't your country see that as something wrong? Ingenium asked, surprised by the freckled man's response. The supreme laws say that unjustified homicide is punishable. but these men attacked me, so my best option was to eliminate them. One, the freckled man explained calmly. One, you look too comfortable after killing those men. One, the wooden hero answered him. One, why should I be sad about the death of criminals? In my country we are taught that life is a gift that must be taken away from people who do not deserve it. One, the freckled man told him. The heroes were surprised by the boy's response. From what the boy described, in his nation people saw nothing wrong with killing people they considered deserved it. That went completely against human rights. One, in any case, one, the freckled man said, after which he took Momo's hand on. We have to get back to the mansion, and as you can see, our vehicle isn't working, so we have to hurry. Onohe said, after which he began to pull the young Yaoyorozu's hand in the direction of his mansion. After a very long walk, they both finally arrived at the mansion. The whole way Momo hadn't said a word, which was starting to worry the freckled boy. One, are you okay, Yaoyorozu-san? She's been very quiet the whole way. One, the freckled man said to the girl. Onim, sorry, it's just that. I think it affected me to see him kill those men like that. One, the girl told him sincerely. The freckled Sigwan, Yaoyorozu-san, you must understand one thing, we come from different worlds, with different cultures. Some things that in your world are considered bad and immoral. In mine it is something that does not represent a moral or legal problem, and likewise some common things in your world can be frowned upon by the people of my world. Onohe explained to the girl. The young woman lowered her head. One, I know that, Gaon-san, it's just that. One, the young woman paused to let out a sigh of resignation. Ona, it's very difficult to see things that I've been told all my life are wrong. Onohe explained his point of view to the prince. The freckled man nodded with understanding. One, I know, and I'm sorry for having exposed you to that, Yaoyorozu-san, but you must understand that if I hadn't done what I did, it's likely that those men would have done horrible things to us. I simply defended myself as I thought appropriate. Onohe explained to the girl. Momo Sayadon, you know, Gaon-san, let's just forget about this whole thing. I'm actually more interested in knowing what those things were that you used in your fight against them. One, the truth was that the ebony girl no longer wanted to talk about the matter. The freckled man accepted the change of subject quite easily. One, do you mean martial arts and magic? One, I asked for clarification. One, first of all, magic isn't real. Second, martial arts. Like kung fu or something. One, the ebony girl told him. Oni, ha ha ha, no. Martial arts are special techniques that the warriors of my world use. Each martial art has a different effect on the body. Some give greater physical strength, others speed, quick thinking, or special techniques with the sword or other weapons, and magic may not exist in your world, but in mine it is actually quite common. One, the freckled man explained to the girl. The girl seemed unhappy, clearly not accepting the idea of magic yet. One, well, what was that black hole you pulled your sword out of? One, I asked him. One, my dimensional storage. It allows me to save whatever I want in a pocket dimension. It's quite useful, the freckled one explained to him. Momo's face lit up with excitement. One, that's awesome. One, said the girl with stars in her eyes. One, out of curiosity, how many ways can you use what you call magic? One, the ebony girl asked with intrigue. One, there are an infinite amount of spells. It depends on what type of magic you specialize in and the level you are able to use. One, the freckled man explained to the girl. One level? One, the teenager asked, confused by the word she had used. The freckled one decided to clarify that point. One, in my world, magic is divided into levels. The higher the level, the more powerful the magic. Onohe explained to the girl. One, that's amazing. One, I tell the boy before suddenly blushing. One, by the way, Gaon-san, we have already arrived at the mansion. One, her blush increased at what he had to say next. Onu, we could stop holding hands, Onohe said timidly to the boy. Only at that moment did the freckled boy realize that they had been holding hands the whole way to the mansion, so a blush appeared on his face and he let go of the girl's hand. One, I'm sorry, Yaoyorozu-san, I just forgot we were holding hands. Onohe nervously apologized to the girl. The girl saw the freckled man's blushing face. She had to admit that he looked very cute this way. Besides, seeing him embarrassed and blushing was a nice change from the prince's usually serious attitude. One, don't worry, Gaon-san, I was just a little surprised. Well, it's a little late and it's been a tiring day. Let's go rest, and please, promise me that if you want to go out you'll let me know so I can accompany you. One, the girl asked him. The freckled man smiled kindly. One, it's a promise, Yaoyorozu-san. After that conversation, Both young men retired to their rooms, each with a job to do. In his room, the freckled boy was writing a document using a pen and ink. A few minutes passed when the document seemed to be complete, so Isizuku put it in an envelope and used his magic. 1. Summon lower level specter. Lesser phantom. 1. I activate the level 3 summon. Instantly, what appeared to be an entity with a semi-transparent body and no face appeared in front of the prince. The specter bowed and waited for the orders of its summoner, who handed him the envelope with the letter he had written. 1. Go to the fortress in the forest and deliver the letter to the highest-ranking member of the army. Tell him to deliver it directly to Beelzebub Nissan. It contains information about some heroes and the most relevant information of this world that I have been able to gather so far. If on the way someone notices your presence, retreat immediately, and if you cannot escape, destroy the letter. Onohe gave his orders to the level 15 specter. The ghost nodded, and in a moment both the ghost and the letter vanished into thin air, leaving the prince alone in the room. Once he finished his report, he lay down on his bed to rest. This would be the first time in his life that he would sleep in a place that was not one of his family's mansions in the kingdom or in Nazarick. The truth is, he felt a little uncomfortable, not only because he is no longer at home, but because this bed was not as comfortable as the ones at home. Well, he shouldn't complain. After all, he volunteered for this mission. Finally he closed his eyes and went to sleep. Meanwhile, in another room of a mansion, the brunette teenager was on a video call with one of Japan's highest-ranking ministers, using the television in her room. 1. And that's all he told me. 1. The brunette said to the well-dressed man who appeared on her screen. The politician seemed surprised by the girl's words. 1. Are you sure about that? 1. I asked the young woman for confirmation. 1. That's right, that's all he said. 1. The brunette said confidently. 1. Those martial arts sounds believable based on the video online, but you're telling me the other stuff he did was magic? 1. The politician said in an uncertain manner. Anna, that's the way he explained it to me. He said that magic was common in his world, that the power of spells was measured in levels. Nehe told the man everything the freckled man had told him. 1. Did he tell you how many levels there are or what level of magic he used? 1. The politician asked. The young brunette shook her head. Oh, name sorry. He didn't tell me anything else. 1. The politician put his hand on his chin, thoughtful. It's okay, Miss Yaoyorzuon, the man sighed before continuing. 1. Although there is something you mentioned that could be a problem, the man commented distractedly. Momo was surprised by the word the man had used. Oni, a problem, what's going on? 1. The girl asked. Anna, that's what the prince said. We are from different cultures, we don't share what we consider normal. If we want him to allow us to go to his world in the future, we need to change his way of thinking a little and adapt it to our principles. That way it will be easier to convince him. 1. The man explained to the girl. The brunette didn't like any of this. Manipulating a boy her age to obtain profits and completely unknown resources from a completely new world was something low, and she didn't like this at all. But her parents had told her, thanks to the deal they had made with the government, they would benefit greatly if the prince gave them authorization. Her father even told her that this could be the future of her family. As much as Momo hated doing this, she knew it was something necessary and she didn't want to disappoint her family. But well, who knows, maybe she could find a way for the prince's country and the Japanese government to benefit equally. 1. But how will we do that? 1. The girl asked the politician. 1. We need a place that instills the values of our society and allows us to monitor the skills that martial arts and magic give you, and that, if possible, allows us to replicate those skills for our heroes to use. 1. The politician began to think about options that would cover those bases, until an idea finally occurred to him. 1. Tell me, young Yaoyorozu, is it true that you plan to enter the UA hero course? 1. The man asked with a smile. Momo was confused by the man's question. 1. Yes, why? 1. She answered, somewhat unsure. Onates perfectone. The politician smiled at the confirmation. 1. You have to make the prince go to the UA hero course. 1. The man said to the dark-haired teenager. 1. What? Why? 1. The girl said, not expecting the man on the other side of the screen to tell her that. Onate's perfect. The UA will teach him the values of heroes and will teach him things about our world that will help us get him to accept giving us permission for exploration and exploitation. Really, each nation of our world is quite interested in the resources that the other side could offer. In addition, the activities of UA heroes will allow us to monitor their martial arts and magic. 1. The man explained his reasoning. The young brunette blinked a couple of times. She knew she didn't have much choice in the matter. One well, how do I convince him to go to Ua? One the girl asked, unsure of how the man planned to get the prince into the best hero training institution in Japan. You'll have to find that out for yourself, that ends our conversation. Onehe said dryly, not caring how the girl would solve his request. After that, the minister ended the video call, leaving Momo with a responsibility on which the future of her family and perhaps the world would depend. Morning arrived at the Yaoyorozu family mansion. Outside, sitting on a terrace overlooking the courtyard of the mansion, was the prince, reading a book he had brought from his world. Seeing him, Momo approached him and saw the book he was reading. It was in a language she did not understand. She assumed it was the language of the freckled man's native world. The brunette sat in a chair next to the green-haired man and took a deep breath before speaking to Himon. Good morning, Gaon Sanon, the ebony girl greeted. Hearing her, the freckled man looked up from his book to observe her. One good morning, Yaoyorozu Sanon, I greet the freckled one. One, what are you reading? One the girl asked. It's a book about my world. It tells one of the best-known legends of my home. One the freckled man told the girl. One sounds interesting. What is the title of the book? Onehe asked curiously. The freckled one smiled. It is a story that tells of a legend that supposedly occurred at the beginning of my father's reign. It is called The Demon Emperor Jaldabaoth, Onehe said with a bit of drama in his voice. It's a bit of a strange name. Onehe said softly before taking a breath in an attempt to build up his courage for what he was going to say. One by the way, Gaon-san, I wanted to talk to you about something important, Onehe told the prince. One, what is it about? One the freckled man asked with a little curiosity. The girl got ready. One, have you thought about what to do in this world until you have to return to yours? Onehe asked while playing with his fingers a little nervously. One, I have some ideas, Onehe commented distractedly. Finally the girl spoke. Because I was thinking that you could enter the Ua hero course with me. That way you would learn more about the system that governs my world and you would be in a place with extremely high security, Onehe said to the freckled one. One course of heroes? One, I asked a little curiously. The freckled boy began to think about the option. From what he knew of this world, people with the most powerful quirks entered the hero courses, so being in one of these would be a good opportunity to analyze the strongest quirks there are. In addition, depending on how he plays his cards, he could even have access to a huge amount of privileged information. One sounds interesting, Onehe told the girl. And tell me, how good is the Ua as an educational institution? One, I asked the girl. The heiress smiled in response, happy that the prince seemed to be interested in the idea. One, it is the best hero academy in Japan. Among its most notable graduates are several top 10 heroes, including the symbol of peace, All Might. He told the freckled one. The green-haired prince was surprised to hear this. He still remembered when he saw All Might. Without a doubt the guy was strong, even by the standards of his world. Going to the place where he studied could be very beneficial, especially if the Ua kept information about those who were part of the student body. 10HHH, that sounds very interesting. I think it could be a feasible option, Onehe said with a smile. The girl's joy seemed to increase in intensity. One, this is wonderful news. The entrance exam will be in a few months. I'll talk to my parents about having you take the recommended exam with me. I'm sure the Ua will be very excited about your application. One, the girl said while putting her hands together in a pose that seemed cute to the freckled man. One, Ahone, the freckled man said as his smile turned into a more sadistic and calculating one, something that the girl didn't notice due to her excited state. Oname also very excited to goon, the freckled man commented. It was a day with clear skies and perfect weather. Some vehicles stopped at the huge arch that formed the entrance to Ua, the best hero academy in all of Japan. Outside the doors of the educational institution a limousine was parked. Inside a couple of teenagers were talking, waiting for Ua to open its doors so they could take the recommended exam. One, and tell me, Gaon-san, did you study the books I gave you? One, the young Yaoyorozu asked the green-haired prince. The freckled one nodded. One, I studied them all. The topics of physics, mathematics and chemistry are practically the same as in my world, but honestly the history of your world is confusing and I didn't understand anything about philosophy or English, Onehe explained to the girl. The young woman showed him a calm smile. One, if you want help you should ask me, one, the girl told him kindly. The prince shook his head. It's not necessary, it was just a little more difficult, but I'm sure I'll pass the exam with honors, Onehe said with immense resolution. The young woman smiled at the freckled man's determined response. "Oh, I'm glad. As I already explained, the UA accepted that he take the recommended exam, but he still has to pass the written and practical exam, and they also gave him permission to use his magic and martial arts in the practical exam." When the jet black woman reminded him of his companion. The freckled man nodded in understanding. "I see, that will be very fun," Onehe calmly told the girl, without showing the common nerves that most UA applicants had. The young woman responded to the freckled man's smile with one of her own, the boy's confidence somehow helping her nerves about taking the exam to subside. "It's true, and to be honest, I'm quite curious about what your magic is capable of doing," the girl commented with a tone of curiosity in her voice that she didn't even try to hide. Izuku smiled, proud of his abilities. "I think you will be surprised," Onehe said with a bit of arrogance in his voice. It had been about 2 months since the prince decided to go to the UA. It had been 2 months in which he hadn't seen his father, his mother, the guardians, the inhabitants of Nazarick or any of his friends from his homeworld. He wasn't going to lie, he missed them, but he had volunteered for this mission, he couldn't back out. In these 10 months several things had happened to the freckled boy. While Momo trained her creation Quirk for the exam, the prince concentrated on studying everything he could about this world, making it quite complicated for him to read the history books. Without a doubt it was completely different from the history of his world. There were some references to magic, dragons and some of the species that inhabited his world, but nothing concrete that told him that they actually existed or exist in this world. During that time he also established a new network of espionage and intelligence gathering, making use of some summoned units with hiding abilities and some members of the kingdom's espionage, infiltration and surveillance unit. His brother had sent him 15 members of the shadow unit just for this. One of the biggest problems they had at that time was impersonating several members of the Japanese government, identifying them and extracting them to be replaced by doppelgangers, something complicated, but not impossible, thanks to the mental abilities of the doppelgangers and the trained information extractors of the kingdom. They obtained all the information of the targets and finally replaced them, giving their nation influence in the Japanese government. Thanks to the skills of the infiltrated units they had managed to kidnap a large number of individuals with interesting quirks, ensuring that the kidnapped were people that the inhabitants of this world referred to as villains. This way they would not attract much attention with their disappearance. The criminals that the hidden units had kidnapped were kept captive in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. In a few days they would be taken to the Sorcerer Kingdom so that scientists could investigate their quirks in detail. In the past 2 months there had been no more incidents like the one in the limousine, so Izuku didn't see the need to use magic or martial arts, limiting the information the Japanese government had collected about him so far. Unfortunately, despite having expanded his information network, he was unable to find out who had orchestrated the attack against him and Momo, but he was sure of one thing. When he found the person who planned it all, he would make sure to take care of him permanently. After all the waiting, it was finally time to take the UA entrance exam. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't a little excited. The whole quirk thing had undoubtedly sparked his curiosity. From what Momo had explained to him, only the elite could take the recommended exam, which meant that there was a huge possibility that the applicants who would take the exam with him would have extremely strong and interesting quirks. For some reason he felt a strange excitement about analyzing quirks. Finally, a noise filled the limousine, and both teenagers watched as the enormous steel doors of the UA sank into the ground, leaving entry free for all students who were willing to take the recommended exam. Both young men got out of the limousine and walked inside the academy. Upon entering, the freckled man was a little impressed. The academy was a huge place. Its main structure was made up of buildings located in a way that looked like the letter H. The entire structure was covered by glass that created a blue reflection that encompassed the entire structure. Around the main building you could see a large green area, in which you could see multiple structures that the prince believed would be for different activities or the training of different types of quirks. Every moment he walked through the UA Academy, his mind was filled with more intrigue. When they arrived at a fountain right in front of the entrance to the main structure of the UA, the freckled man saw a woman wearing a shameful outfit, giving the applicants directions on where they had to go to take the exam. The woman in question was wearing a white outfit made of an extremely thin and tight fabric, which allowed her voluptuous figure to be fully visible. She had black boots and a strange mask on her face. In fact, That set of clothes was worryingly similar to the clothes that the Supreme Being Peroroncino had left for his godmother Shaltir in her room inside the Great Tomb of Nazarick. This simple thought gave him a shiver as he remembered the personality of his sister's mother. He hoped that whoever this woman was did not have a similar behavior to his godmother, one who is the woman in sexual clothing. Onehe whispered to Momo, who was standing next to him. The heiress almost choked at the prince's question. It's true that Midnight's clothes were a bit revealing and indecent, but she hadn't expected her companion to ask about it in such a direct way. 1SHE is the heroine Midnight, she is one of the teachers at UA1, the girl also whispered back, not wanting the heroine in question to hear their exchange. The freckled man was confused. Why was a woman like her a teacher? I mean, he couldn't understand how the school allowed a woman in attire like that to teach in this place. It would undoubtedly be a strong distraction for the male students, or perhaps the school didn't take that into consideration. One in your world, is it appropriate for a woman like her to teach hormonal teenagers? Onehe asked the brunette in a whisper. The heiress was ready to refute the misconception that the freckled man had formed upon seeing Midnight, when the latter's voice giving the exam instructions did not allow her to respond to the green-haired prince. Attention all applicants, please enter through the side door to take your written exam. The +18 heroine announced to all the young people who were arriving at the academy. Both young men followed the professor's instructions and walked inside the UA, arriving at what appeared to be a huge room with several tables and chairs. The two young men sat in the adjacent seats and waited for the exam to begin. During the exam, the freckled man heard some occasional complaints from some of the applicants who were taking the exam with him. For him, and from what he could see also for Yaoyorozu, the exam was quite simple, which was strange, taking into account that he came from another world and much of his knowledge was contrary to what was taught in this world. It was surprising how simple the exam was, considering that he had to learn all the knowledge that differed from his world in just 2 months. About an hour passed when the exam was declared over, after which all the students including the green-haired boy and the brunette were taken to a new room that Midnight called Gamma Gym. Everyone gathered there waiting for the instructions for the practical part of the exam. Once everyone was gathered in the gym next to what appeared to be a running track, a blond man in a black suit and carrying speakers on his shoulders approached the group of applicants to give instructions for the practical part of the exam. Hey, welcome applicants, who's ready for the practical exam? The blond man announced excitedly, although none of those present responded, choosing to remain silent. HMP, difficult audience. Hey complained in a low voice. Well applicants, the practical exam consists of an obstacle course, in which you will be allowed to use your quirks. Remember, you do not necessarily have to win the race to enter the UA, you will be graded by the control you have in your quirks, so good luck applicant soon, the loud man announced between shouts. After that, present Mike began to call the students in groups of 5 applicants. The freckled man waited attentively, watching all the races that happened before him. Among all of them there were some that caught his attention. The main one was the race of a boy with a shaved head whose quirk seemed to allow him to control the wind, and a boy with hair parted in half, one side white and the other red, whose quirk seemed to allow him to create ice, which he used to slide all the way to the finish line. At the end of the race, in the end the shaved boy won. After in the last second he went ahead and won the race by a nose. After that interesting race came Yaoyorozu's race, in which Momo showed great mastery of her gift, using it to create skates, canes and even small rockets that she used to boost herself and quickly reach the finish line, which allowed her to take first place in her group. They finally called Izuku, 1 Tenya Iida, Tokage Setsuna, and the last Izuku Ooal Gown won. The loud man from before announced, but quieter this time. Hearing the last name on the list, people started to murmur. The freckled man was already famous for being a prince from a strange and completely unknown world. But after the fight he had 10 months ago, news about him was all over the place. When one of the civilians recorded the fight, they started talking a lot about him on the news and on the internet, from theories about the abilities he had used in the fight, from the vines and the energy arrow he had apparently created. The theories were practically false theories about how people in his world also had quirks, and probably more than one, based on the abilities the freckled man had shown during his fight. None of the participants had noticed his presence until present Mike said his name. No one expected him to take the recommended exam, so it was quite interesting to see him in this place. Many whispered about whether he would use the same skills he showed in the fight. Watching the situation from the monitors, The teachers and a politician who had come only to see the freckled man began to get quite excited to see him use the magic of his world and his martial arts. The green-haired boy ignored the comments about him and walked towards the starting line, where the other competitors were preparing for the race. Once at the starting line, the freckled boy began to do some stretches for running, when a green-haired girl approached him, waving her hand at him. Hello, hey, is it true that you are the prince of another world? The girl with sharp teeth asked. The freckled man smiled at the girl. That's right, it's a pleasure to meet you, miss. Onehe asked the girl for her name. Yeah, sorry for not introducing myself, I'm Setsuna Tokujion. The girl introduced herself to the freckled man. The freckled one nodded. My name is Isizuku Ooal Gown. He introduced himself to the girl politely. Both teenagers would have continued talking if it weren't for a tall guy with dark blue hair, glasses, and making strange movements with his arms who approached them both to reprimand them. Hey you guys, stop talking and take the exam seriously, you are distracting the other participants. And I point to the freckled one. It doesn't matter if you're part of a foreign royalty, you won't be admitted to UA if you continue with such a relaxed attitude like that, Onehe said to the freckled man sternly. The green-haired prince was very surprised. No one in his world, not even in this world, had dared to speak to him that way. The only ones who had done something similar were his parents and some inhabitants of Nazareth, which was not very common. The fact that that guy had dared to speak to him like that would have been punished in his world with execution. Probably sentenced by order of his mother, but this did not bother him. He knew, in this world nobody knew him or his father. If he really wanted this world to feel the same respect for his family as the people of his native world, then he would have to start doing things to earn that respect. This boy's comment only motivated him even more to show the inhabitants of this world the greatness of the last of the 41 supreme beings and their descendants. The freckled man smiled calmly. You're right, let's focus on the exam. Onehe answered the boy with glasses calmly, after which he turned his attention to the sharp-toothed girl he had been talking to a moment ago. I hope we can talk after the exam is over, Tokage-san. The freckled man said to him kindly. The girl nodded with a mischievous smile on her face. Yes, no problem. Onehe turned around and started walking away while waving goodbye. See you later Gown-san. Or Sama. I don't know, it's the first time I've talked to someone from royalty. The girl told him as a little joke. The prince smiled amused at the little joke the girl had played on him. Ha, no problem, call me whatever you prefer. Onehe answered her kindly. The girl increased the size of her flirtatious smile. Okay, see you later, Gown-kun. The girl said as she walked away to her place in the race with amusement. The freckled man smiled in response and stood in his designated spot at the starting line. It was then that Present Mike spoke. Well done participants. Everyone in position. The hero advertisement. Hearing that the race was about to start, the prince got into a running pose and in front of the candidates, teachers and politicians who came to see him use the skills of his world, he began to activate his martial arts. 1 Martial art. Speed boost martial art. Greater speed boost martial art. Swift step martial art. Acceleration martial art. Maximum acceleration 1. With each martial art he activated, his body was surrounded by auras of different colors, which were analyzed with special devices that the UA had placed on the race track before the recommended exam began, by order of the director of the academy. Start. Present mic announcement. Upon hearing this, all the applicants ran away. The ones who went ahead were the boy named Tenya and Setsuna. Iida seemed to run using strange tubes on his legs, which the freckled man identified as the same kind of tubes that the cars of this world used to release their exhaust and pollution, while Setsuna seemed to divide his body into small parts, which began to float through the field towards the finish line. Although the freckled man was far ahead thanks to the martial arts he was using, his speed increased exponentially, which quickly placed him in first place, being followed by Iida and Setsuna. Meanwhile, inside a monitoring room a group of men were watching the race, more specifically the prince. Very interesting the government-appointed politician commented. A scientist in the observation area was observing the energy readings that the freckled man was giving off. I've never seen a trail of energy like this before. The energy surges from within him and increases the strength in his leg muscles, providing superior speed. I have no idea how he does that, but it's truly incredible. One the man commented to the rest of the room. The director, who had his attention fixed on the race, began to speak. Onsunhei said as he turned his attention away from the screen to the scientist and the readings he saw on his screen. One, what can you tell us about the prince's abilities? One, the director asked the scientist. One, I don't know. I've never seen anything like this. I'm really not sure if it could be replicated, but learning more about this will require more testing. One, the scientist told those present with great interest. The politician looked at the director Chimera seriously. One, Director Nezu will understand how important it is to keep the prince's abilities under constant monitoring, so I ask that regardless of the result of the race, you allow him to enter the academy. Onehei told him sternly but at the same time with the respect that the animal with the intelligence quirk deserved. The little white-furred director nodded. That's how it will be done. After all, it will be very interesting to have a student who uses magic. One, the little being said with amusement before starting to laugh like a madman. One, ha 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 ha. Onehei was excited to know what they could learn from his new student. Returning to the race, the prince remained in first place. It seemed that he had the victory assured when suddenly Iida seemed to give an enormous boost. From his exhaust pipes a blue fire began to come out, which was accompanied by an enormous increase in speed, overtaking the freckled man and quickly approaching the finish line. One, anything less than an absolute victory would be an insult to the father. Onehei said in a whisper. On martial art. Major boost. Onehei activates his martial art. This was a fairly simple martial art. When activated it simply caused a powerful burst of momentum while running, which only lasted for an instant, but based on how close he was to the finish line and how close the boy with glasses was to winning, it was his best bet. When the martial art was activated, the freckled boy shot towards the finish line. Due to the powerful momentum, as he ran he began to throw some debris in his path, which began to fall on Iida's face, clouding his vision and causing him to reduce his speed, which was taken advantage of by Setsuna to overtake the sprinter. Finally the three finished the race, with the prince in first place, the girl with the fractional body in second and the sprinter in third place. Once the three finished the race they stopped for a moment to catch their breath. The prince was happy for his victory. He would never say it out loud, but he could not tolerate losing. I mean, he was the son of the last of the supreme beings, the one who led the 41 and who currently rules the entirety of his world. If he lost he would feel like someone unworthy of being his father's son, and he would never allow something like that. After the race was over, the freckled boy turned his attention to Iida and Setsuna. The girl seemed happy to have obtained second place, but Iida seemed terribly depressed. He had his back leaning forward and his gaze fixed on the ground, while an aura of depression came out of him. One, I lost, despite having a speed-based quirk. I finished in third place. The young man with the exhaust pipes on his legs said depressedly. The girl with the divisible body seemed much calmer in the face of defeat. One, wow, that was amazing. One, the young woman suddenly approached the green-haired man, completely invading his personal space. One, what you did was amazing. Gown Kunon. The girl seemed very curious. One, do quirks also exist in your world? Onehei asked the question that most Japanese had after watching the video of the freckled man's fight. The prince shook his head. Oh, you're mistaken. Quirks don't exist in my home. What I use are martial arts. The girl blinked a couple of times, processing the freckled man's words. One, martial arts. Like karate and stuff like that? One, the girl asked. The freckled man smiled kindly, although he was beginning to feel uncomfortable answering the same question for the second time. One, you are wrong. Martial arts are techniques that the warriors of my world use. Depending on the type of martial art we use we can obtain an increase in strength, speed, increase in thinking, or simply special techniques with weapons. Onehei explained to the girl. The girl seemed surprisingly excited by the explanation. One, wow, that sounds amazing. One, the girl clung too close to the prince. One, do you think you could teach me? One, she asked flirtatiously. The freckled man thought about it for a moment. He had not yet tried to see if the people of this world were capable of using magic or martial arts. It would be very interesting to try to find out. One, who knows, it might be a viable option later on. Onehei replied to the girl, who seemed moved by the answer. The girl pressed the freckled man's arm between her breasts, making him blush slightly. One, that sounds amazing. One, the girl said with a big smile. When the prince felt his arm between the girl's soft breasts, a slight blush invaded his face. Despite being a prince in his world, he had almost no experience with the opposite sex. He had never focused much on it, The most he had reached in his experience with the other sex was having some friends in his world, but apart from that, his experience was practically null. Her blush did not go unnoticed by the green-haired girl who had caused it. 10H, you blushed, one Setsuna said in a mocking tone. One, how beautiful, one, the girl said with a smile. Before Setsuna could do anything else, the prince's other arm was taken and in a strong movement pulled away from the green-haired girl. When they turned their gaze, both green-haired girls met with black eyes and jet black hair looking at them with annoyance. One, Prince Gown, one, the brunette said with a smile that sent shivers down both green-haired girls' spines. One, now that the test is over, it's time for us to go home. Onehe looked at the freckled man and started pulling on his arm, dragging him to the exit of the Gamma Gym. Let's hurry, the limousine is waiting for us. One, the girl said, quickening her pace. Faced with the sudden departure of Momo and Izuku, the freckled man was only able to wave goodbye to the green-haired girl with the interesting gift. Seeing this, Setsuna just smiled flirtatiously and said goodbye. During the 2 months that the two young men spent together, the young brunette was able to learn many things from him, and not just the information she had to deliver to the government about the few things the freckled man revealed about his world and the skills he used. In the time they spent together, the heiress learned things about him such as some of his tastes. The boy had developed a taste for eating katsudon. He liked to read in his free time, although the young Yaoyorozu could not read the language in which Izuku's books were written, which was strange considering that the prince could read Japanese without any problem. In addition to the fact that he seemed to love classical music, he was a very kind, polite and caring person, as well as being a great confidant. It seemed that the prince felt enormous admiration for his father. The few times that Momo had managed to get him to talk about his father, he always showed immense admiration and emotion when talking about him. Although the heiress had not been able to obtain much information from the king of the other world, he had not even told her the name of her father or told her many things about him. The only information she had been able to gather was that the prince's father was someone extremely kind, wise and far-sighted. She also learned that the prince was really terrible when it came to technology. It was extremely funny to her when he tried to use some electronic device and ended up failing and getting frustrated. She remembered how when the first month of his arrival in this world was up, she gave him a latest generation cell phone, tried to teach him the best she could how to use it, but finally he gave up and never learned how to use it, choosing to abandon it somewhere in the mansion, which caused the girl a lot of laughter. It was quite interesting this time they spent together. She had never in her life spent so much time with a boy her age. But she really liked the green-haired prince. In fact, they both had many things in common. They both enjoyed quiet moments, and in recent months they had both been constantly going out to the street accompanied by guards, to do different activities, from going to the mall to going to an arcade. The young woman laughed constantly at the memory of telling the prince that she couldn't pay for everything with precious gems and gold. At this point the heiress wondered how it was that the gold and gems hadn't run out in this time. She really wasn't sure why she had pulled the freckled man away from the girl she had been talking to. Just seeing them so close together had caused her discomfort. Finally Momo ended her train of thought when they both arrived at the limousine. At this moment she let go of the freckled man's arm and they both entered the vehicle. When the limousine started they both remained silent. The young woman felt annoyed by the closeness that the green-haired man had with the girl from before, and the prince chose to remain silent because he noticed Momo's bad mood and if his experience with his mother, his godmothers and his sisters had taught him anything, it was that he should not bother a woman when she was upset. But after a few minutes in which the silence continued, the freckled man gathered his courage and finally spoke. Excuse me, Yaoyorozu-san, if I may ask, is there any particular reason for your upset mood? I thought you would be happy after the exam, especially after your great performance in the practical exam. When the boy began to speak with a slight attempt to cheer her up. The girl looked at him in such a way that the freckled man was sure that if his gift was laser vision he would now have a hole in his head. I'm not upset. The girl yelled at him, clearly annoyed. At the girl's scream, the freckled man quickly backed away and stood in a corner of the limousine, his gaze fixed on the driver of the car he had known since he came into this world. The man simply pressed a button closing the window that separated them, leaving the prince to his fate. At this moment the freckled man concentrated on all the knowledge he had acquired from being in the middle of the fights of his mother, his godmothers and his sisters, so he tried to apply it at this moment to calm the female. Well, Despite all his experience, he remained undecided about what to say. In that case, is there anything I can do to improve your mood? 1. Perfect. A simple question, but without indicating that she was upset. It was impossible for that to trigger a negative reaction in her. The young woman thought for a few moments, something he could do. Suddenly something occurred to her. Onu have known each other for 2 months, Gaon-san, and we've lived together all that time. Suddenly his previously furious attitude changed to a more nervous one. You could call me by my name. The girl asked while playing with her fingers nervously. The prince froze. She wanted him to call her by her name. In his world that was nothing out of the ordinary, but from what he had learned, here, calling someone by their name indicated great closeness. Upon understanding that, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Oni, your name? I asked for confirmation. The girl looked really nervous and a little sad at the freckled man's confusion. Oni, you don't want to? The girl asked nervously. The freckled man quickly denied with his hands what the girl had thought. Onin, it's not that, it's just thought. Oni, in second thought, it would be best to simply do it. In his world it was not unusual to call someone by their name. One'll be happy to do it. Yao. I mean, Momo-chanon, the freckled man told him calmly, concentrating on doing the same thing as in his world. There was no need to worry about foreign customs. Hearing the freckled man call her, the young woman blushed even more and began to play with her hands and look at the floor of the limousine in a nervous movement. Thank you, Isizuku Kunon, the girl thanked him, using the freckled man's name. Both teenagers blushed due to the enormous shame they felt and could not see each other's faces for the rest of the day. When they arrived at the mansion, they both got out of the vehicle without saying a word. They went to their rooms in complete silence, and without even looking at each other, they both locked themselves in their rooms. The young brunette's face was completely red. Never in her life had she dared to call a boy by his name, much less ask the boy to call her by her name. She really had no idea why she asked it in the first place. She only knew that now she was extremely embarrassed. Before she could calm down a little more, the television in her room turned on and the same politician she had been talking to months ago appeared on the screen. Excellent work, Miss Yaoyorozu. The data we collected from the prince during the exam was very valuable. The man said to the girl with a smile on his face. The heiress stood with her back to the television so that the politician on the screen wouldn't notice that she was still blushing. I see, but that doesn't explain why he's calling me. The girl said seriously. She wanted to finish this call as quickly as possible. Nothing special, the politician explained. I just wanted to see if since our last communication the prince has revealed more information about his world. The man said calmly. The young woman kept her back to the screen. Nothing new, Onehe said to the man seriously. The politician's attitude became annoying. Damn, we've been at it for 2 months and we don't even know the name of their nation. The man complained, frustrated by the little information they had gathered about the green-haired prince's world. The heiress nodded. Onehe is careful. He avoids questions that reveal information about his world. I am not sure why he is so cautious, but he is not willing to reveal important information. The girl explained to the man. The politician sighed in disappointment. Well, we'll talk later. The man said before disconnecting the call. After that the communication was cut off, the young woman was finally able to breathe calmly. Her face was still flushed and she was constantly thinking about the prince. She didn't know why she kept thinking about him or why she was happy that he called her Momo-chan. She began to worry, wondering if he would be upset with her if he found out that she was constantly talking to the Japanese government, revealing everything he told her. Would he hate her or be upset with her? That thought caused sadness and worry in her heart. Not knowing how to handle it, she lay down on her luxurious bed and covered her face with a pillow, trying to forget these feelings. Meanwhile, in the prince's room, he was washing his face in the bathroom of his room, trying to reduce the blush on his face. When the blush decreased enough, he went to the door of his room and put the lock on it. Once he made sure that no one entered, he began his work. 1. Teleportation 1. The teleportation spell was the most basic spatial movement magic there was. It was level 3 and was practically useless since it didn't require much effort to block, and its accuracy when teleporting wasn't very high. But from what the freckled man had seen, this world didn't have the capabilities to block teleportation, so he decided that there would be no problem using a magic as simple as this. After using his magic, the prince appeared in the middle of the city dock. The place looked quiet, there was not a soul in sight. He walked through the empty place for a few minutes until he came to a huge warehouse that at first glance looked abandoned. He approached the door and knocked on it 3 times. Then a male voice sounded from inside the warehouse. Great as the supreme being of absolute defense one. The man inside gave the clue to the password. 1 because the supreme being of archery is his brother. 1 the freckled man said the other part of the password. Immediately the door was opened and on the other side was seen a thin man a couple of heads smaller than the freckled one, wearing a completely black suit similar to a ninja suit, who upon seeing the prince immediately knelt on the ground and put his hand on his chest. 1 My lord, we were waiting for you. 1 the man said. The freckled man just nodded and entered the warehouse. Inside the warehouse looked completely different than outside. It was cleaner than one would expect. The worrying thing were the tables located throughout the warehouse. At each table there were men and women, some with mutations, all chained and gagged, screaming as loud as they could for their lives. Walking among the chained men and women you could see skeletons and some people with the same clothes as the man who was with the freckled Manon. What a scandal! Onehe said with annoyance at the constant shouts being made by the people at the tables. The man following him closely nodded. 1 You are right, your majesty, it is fortunate that they are finally being taken away today. 1 the man commented. The freckled one smiled. Don't get too excited, after all, as soon as they take this group away, more specimens will have to be gathered. 1 the freckled man said calmly. Before the conversation could continue, to the side of where the man and Izuku were standing, a mass of pure darkness opened up. It looked like a hole of pure darkness in the middle of the warehouse. Suddenly a figure came out of the portal created with the gate spell, a thin figure, with dark skin, black hair combed into spikes, who was wearing an orange British suit with white stripes and glasses with a huge reflection that prevented his eyes from being seen. Seeing the figure, the freckled man bowed in respect, while the man next to him knelt on the ground with his right fist over his heart. 1 Demiurge, it's a pleasure to see you again. 1 the freckled man said to him with immense respect in his voice. The demon smiled calculatingly. 1 Young prince, it's been a while. 1 the guard said as he bowed to the prince. The freckled man nodded with understanding. 1 Certainly. 1 And tell me, how is your mission going? 1 Demiurge asked him. 1 Everything is going according to plan. The prince made a worryingly devil-like smile as he explained. 1 The warehouse we are in is protected by several anti-spy spells and security measures in case it is found. I have shadow demons watching the people of interest. So far no one has noticed our movements. 1 I explained to the guard. The demon stretched his arms in the air in a theatrical pose of astonishment. 1 Amazing. I wouldn't expect anything less from Ainz Sama's son. Onehe gave the freckled man a compliment. The prince's proud smile increased. 1 I appreciate the compliments. No Onehe paused to point out the people tied to the tables. 1 Here are the 500 specimens you requested. We have varied between several quirks for the studies, kidnapping only criminals that no one will report as missing. I'm sure no one will miss them. 1 The freckled man told him. The demon widened his smile. 1 Perfect, I'm eager to research humans with quirks, Onehe told the prince. 1 I selected the people with the best quirks I found for your personal amusement. I hope you enjoy them. 1 The freckled man told him. The archdevil looked at the boy with pride. 1 I appreciate the consideration, Onehe told the prince. The tanned-skinned demon snapped his fingers and immediately several iron golems emerged from the portal, which began to carry the prisoners and take them to the portal 1 by 1, at the same time that the men still tied and gagged screamed with all their might, which was ignored by Izuku, Demiurge and the members of the Shadow Squad who were present. As the golems transported the specimens through the portal, Izuku and Demiurge continued their conversation. 1 By the way, young prince, did anything good happen to you recently? 1 The demon asked with interest. The prince tilted his head to one side, confused by the question. 1 Not really, why? Onehe asked the reason for the guard's question. The demon began to speak as he turned his attention to the prisoners brought to the other side of his door. 1 I notice he's a little happier than the last time we talked. I also notice a slight blush on his cheeks. 1 I comment almost distractedly. The freckled boy immediately remembered what had happened a few moments ago in the limousine with the daughter of the Yaoyorozu. Suddenly the blush on his face increased a little. He moved his head to one side in an attempt to prevent Demiurge from seeing him like that. Unfortunately for him, the archdemon had noticed his blush, causing some curiosity about what had happened. 1 Did something happen that I should know about? One the demon asked him. One it is not relevant to my mission or to the father's grand plan. One the freckled man had no intention of prolonging the conversation with the demon. One maybe I should inform Albedo of her scheming behavior. One the demon commented on the mysterious actions of the freckled man. The prince trembled at the mention of his mother, that is to say, she was his mother and he loved her, but even as her son had to admit it, that woman caused him terror. Oh no, there's no need to bother my mother with something so trivial, much less the father. One when he mentioned them, memories of his family flooded his mind. One by the way, how is everyone? One the freckled man asked curiously. The demon chose to ignore the prince's situation, at least for the moment. One in the case of the guardians, we have remained in the jobs that Ainz Sama assigned to us without many changes. Ainz Sama remains busy in his duties, while in the case of his brothers one I push his glasses up before continuing. One Princess Eleanor Sama and Serene Sama are fine. Onehei told the prince. The freckled man couldn't help but notice that Demiurge had intentionally omitted Beelzebub, which caused him some concern. One what of Beelzebub? One I asked curiously. The demon's face changed to a more serious one. One Prince Beelzebub disappeared about a month ago, Onehei told the freckled one. The green-haired man froze for a moment. Had his brother disappeared? What the hell happened to him? Was he okay? He couldn't help but let his concern show on his face, something that the guardian hadn't missed. One He disappeared. What in the name of the Supremes happened? One the freckled man asked, upset by the shocking news. Onehei disappeared when he went to investigate a dimensional magic signature on the Arcat continent on Ainz Sama's orders. One the demon explained to him. The freckled man was really worried. Are you sure he disappeared? I mean, the trip to Arcat is long, and if father didn't give him a teleportation scroll, it's possible he made the trip by boat. One the freckled man told him. The demon looked at him with understanding. He was glad that the prince cared about his brother. It was good that the descendants of the Supreme got along. A united front was something beneficial for Nazarcone. Cerberus appeared alone at the entrance to the village of Tarion, the devil explained to the freckled man. It didn't take much more to convince the freckled man that his brother had indeed disappeared. Cerberus was his brother's mount, a demonic Pegasus that his brother never allowed to stray too far from him. The fact that Cerberus had arrived alone at the city of Tarion meant that something had happened to his brother. One for the Supreme Oneson, the freckled man said with fear in his voice. One, do you need me to come back? One the freckled one asked. I could use some of my special items to help find him. One the freckled man exclaimed. His priority was to find his brother. Demiurge shook his head slightly. One No, you volunteered for this mission and withdrawing now would be an offense to the trust Ainz Sama has placed in you. One the demon answered him sternly. The prince knew it was true, he couldn't let his father down. One also, there's nothing to worry about. Ainz Sama already sent Eleanor to search for the prince. He sent her with some of the best tracking items in the world. Taking into account Eleanor's ability, I'm sure she'll find him. One I explained the devil to him. Isn't it dangerous for Eleanor Neeson? One the freckled man asked, worrying a little about his sister's health. Demiurge showed a sly and calculating smile. One please Prince Izuku, do you really believe that Ainz Sama would send two of his sons to imminent death? I am convinced that there is something special for which he sends them to the same place. One the man said with impressive confidence. One who knows what kind of plan both princes are participating in without knowing the magnitude of their actions. One the man said in wonder. That made perfect sense. If his father was doing this, there was no way that whatever was found where his brother disappeared was something normal. As always, it had to be part of his father's grand plan, although he would like to know what it was about. Well, there really wasn't a big danger. Beelzebub was one of the most stubborn guys he knew. He wouldn't die easily and his sister was amazing with magic. Besides, even if they died on the mission it would only take a spell from his father to revive them to wherever the father's plan takes them. It will surely be something incredible. Now calmer, the prince was finally able to think better about the situation on the other side of the door, realizing something. Wait a minute, if Beelzebub Neeson and Eleanor Neeson went to carry out father's mission, that means the one leading the other side's defenses is, one the prince said, feeling really worried about the option left. One Princess Serenion. Demiurge finished the prince's sentence. Instead of feeling worried like the descendant of the Supreme, the demon simply smiled with amusement. You'd be surprised at how much she complains about having to do the paperwork and coordination with the squads on her own. She's even making death threats to her brothers for leaving. One the demon commented with amusement. At his sister's final comment, the prince could do nothing but smile in amusement at his sister's open hatred of politics and paperwork. Oh ha ha ha, I expected something like that from her. Onehe commented in a mocking tone towards his sister. Unfortunately the conversation could not continue because at that moment the golems finished transporting the prisoners. 10H, looks like it's time for me to go. Hope to see you again soon, young prince. One the elegantly dressed demon said to him elegantly. The freckled man bowed respectfully. One I will look forward to that momentone. I respect the freckled one. Once Demiurge left, the freckled man was left alone again. He turned his attention to the member of the shadow unit who had remained kneeling and silent throughout the conversation. Onelocate new specimens, preferably with powerful traits, and try to avoid taking anyone who draws too much attention. I will return to the mansion. Onehe gave orders to his men. One yes sir. One the soldier said in response to the freckled man's orders. One teleportation. One the freckled man activates his spell. He immediately disappeared from the place and appeared inside his room in the Yaoyorozu family mansion. Once there he threw himself on his bed covering his face with his pillow. Despite the situation with his family, he couldn't help but feel a strong blush appear on his face when he remembered his talk with Momo and the fact that Demiurge had seen him blushing. Then his mind went to think of Momo. She was in fact someone very nice. Even in his world there were very few women like her. She was intelligent, kind, caring and a good person. Not to mention that she was really cute. Thinking the last thing his blush increased, he put his face against his pillow and whispered to himself, if mother knew what I was thinking, she would be furious. Onehe let out a sigh. I just hope Demiurge doesn't say anything to him. Besides, it's not like I like Yaoyorozu-san. I just think she's nice. One not realizing that while he said that, he had a huge idiotic grin on his face. It was already morning. The rays of sunlight began to filter through the curtains. Slowly a lump covered by several blankets on the enormous bed began to move. The blankets were removed by the occupant of the bed. With that action his figure became visible. A green-haired figure slowly got out of bed. The boy was completely naked except for a black underwear that covered his genitals. When he got up he stretched a little and headed to the bathroom in his room to take a shower. A few minutes passed and when he finished getting ready he left his room and walked towards the dining room of the enormous mansion, composed mainly of an extremely long rectangular table and the waiters who brought the food from the kitchen. Upon arriving at the dining room the freckled man fixed his gaze on the young brunette sitting at one end of the table. Upon seeing her a small blush took over his face and he sat at the opposite end of the table not having the courage to speak to her yet. Apparently the dark-haired teenager thought the same. Since she didn't even speak to the freckled man, they both sat and ate in silence. When they finished eating they were both going to get up when one of the Yaoyorozu family's servants opened the dining room doors with a couple of envelopes in his hand. One excuse me, Miss Yaoyorozu, Prince Gown, a letter just arrived for both of you from UA1 the maid told them. One excellent, please leave them on the table, and could you leave Izuku-kun and me alone for a while to open the letters? One the jet black heiress asked the maid. One as you say, Miss Yaoyorozu said the maid, who left the envelopes on the table before leaving along with all the servants who had been present in the room. Both teenagers remained alone in the room, remaining in constant silence, until finally the silence was interrupted by the voice of the dark-haired teenager. One well, Izuku-kun, we'd better check the cards. One the girl told him a little nervous to see her results. It's okay, Momo-chan. One the freckled man said with a smile. The prince stood up from his chair and slowly walked until he was in front of the heiress. Once there he took the envelope that the UA had sent them and decided to open it first. When he did so a small silver disc-shaped device came out of the envelope and fell to the table. One there is no letter, Onehe said as he checked the inside of the envelope, after which he curiously observed the disc on the table. One what is this supposed to be? One I asked the girl. The girl looked at the device with a confusion equal to his. Name not sir. One the girl answered him. The freckled boy slowly brought his finger closer and gently pressed the tip of the device's button. As he did so the entire top of the disc lit up. Getting scared, the freckled boy moved in front of Momo with the intention of protecting her, but instead of an attack, an image formed in the air above where the disc was. In front of both of them appeared a hologram of Midnight, who began to speak in a flirtatious manner. One Yuju, greetings young Yaoyorozu, Prince Gown, I am here with wonderful news. after seeing your high score in the theoretical exam and your excellent performance in the practical exam, both of you have entered the UA, being among the 5 students who entered by recommendation this year. One eye wink at the young people, one eye look forward to seeing both of you at the UA. Well, that's the whole message. Onehei waved goodbye animatedly. One bye Onehei said before the image faded. Both young people were happy to have entered, but Momo felt even happier because this was one of her greatest dreams. In her enormous joy, she threw herself into the prince's arms in a moment of emotion. We did it. We got into the UA. The girl said, really happy. Before the freckled boy could decide what he should do with the girl's hug, the young brunette finally realized what she was doing, because at that moment a huge blush took over her face and with a quick jump she separated herself from the freckled boy and stepped back, trying to adapt a serious posture again despite her clearly flushed face. I apologize for that. I got too excited. The young woman apologized. No problem. I understand. The freckled man reassured the girl. The embarrassment returned immediately and they both went their separate ways without even saying goodbye, spending the rest of the week avoiding each other. Finally a week passed and the first day of classes at UA arrived. It was still quite early and the pair of teenagers were already sitting in the Yaoyorozu family limousine, wearing the UA uniforms. The atmosphere in the vehicle was quite tense. Both had spent the last week avoiding each other due to Momo's spontaneous hug. After spending those days without speaking to each other and with intense shame, neither knew what to say to break the uncomfortable silence. I think we should forget about the hug. The dark-haired girl said with an embarrassed blush. The young man responded calmly, his undead half helping a lot to control his emotions. You're right, I wouldn't like to continue the awkward situation. The boy responded kindly. The girl sighed with relief. Thank God we think alike. The girl said more calmly. Prince Rio funny ha ha ha. By the Supremes, I can't believe we haven't talked in a week, said the freckled man who was beginning to laugh at the peculiar situation they had both found themselves in. What the freckled man said was engraved in Momo's mind, Supreme. Based on how he used the expression, maybe he was referring to his gods. Perhaps he let his guard down when talking to her and the expression escaped him. She was about to ask him about it, when Miss Yaoyorozu, Prince Gown, we have arrived. The driver announced. Both teenagers got out of the limousine under the watchful eyes of several UA students who were already entering the facilities. On the way to their classroom both remained silent, but unlike before it was not an awkward silence. The young woman was distracted thinking about the green-haired man's comment about the Supremes, while the prince was distracted looking at the structure of the UA. It seemed very interesting to him since this was the first time he was in a building like this. Finally, after a few minutes, they both arrived at what appeared to be the door to their classroom. They both stared at the enormous door that formed the entrance. The enormous door to the classroom must have been at least 5 meters long. Without further ado, the classroom door was opened and both teenagers were finally able to see the inside of the classroom. Most of the seats were already occupied because both young men arrived a little late, probably because of the prince and his problem when putting on his uniform tie. He finally gave up trying and had to ask one of the butlers of the mansion for help. They both saw the inside of the classroom, but what really caught their attention was a conversation that occurred in the middle of class, in which a boy with glasses was yelling at a blonde boy, who for some reason seemed familiar to the green-haired boy, who had his feet on the table. Put your feet off the desk. You are disrespecting the UA veterans and the person who made the desk. The boy with glasses scolded the blonde. The blonde boy smirked, ignoring the speedster's claims. No way, what school did you go to? Extra one, the ash blonde boy asked defensively. The boy with glasses put his hand on his chest proudly. I went to Some Private Academy. I'm Tenya Ida. The boy introduced himself. The blonde raised his voice on Esame. Are you part of the elite? The blonde boy showed a worrying sadistic smile. Have fun destroying you, Onehei told her threateningly. Iida opened his eyes in surprise at the boy's response. Destroy me? How cruel. Do you really want to be a hero? Onehei asked, after which he turned his gaze, noticing the arrival of the prince and the heiress. You are, Onehei said, noticing the arrival of the freckled man. At that moment the attention of the whole class was fixed on the pair of students who had just entered the class. mainly on a certain green-haired man who had become popular lately in the news for coming from another world and his unknown abilities. Iida approached both teenagers. "It's a pleasure to see you again. My name is." When Iida was about to properly introduce himself to both of them, when he was abruptly interrupted by the freckled man. "One Tenya Iida, we just heard Iton." The freckled man answered him sharply but respectfully. The boy with glasses looked a little embarrassed. "That's how it is," one said the boy with glasses, after which he bowed 90 degrees to the freckled boy. "I wanted to apologize to you, Prince Gown, if I offended you with what I said during the exam. I hope I didn't cause an international incident." The boy apologized to the freckled boy, ashamed of his behavior during the recommended exam. The prince waved his hand casually. "Don't worry, I wouldn't make a big deal out of something as small as that," the freckled man said calmly. Iida gave him another bow of thanks. "Thank you for accepting my apologies," the boy said seriously. Deep down, Katsuki Bakugo was silently watching the exchange of words. He hadn't even spoken to the prince, but he didn't like him. Who did he think he was? Maybe in his world he was important, but here he was just a damn quirkless guy who had some weird tricks. He hated that all the news channels were talking about that guy and how he had decided to enter the UA hero course. Why was he doing it in the first place? The jerk wouldn't stay in his world forever, and Katsuki doubted that the guy had any real interest in being a hero, especially because of what he had told the heroes the day he was attacked by the mud villain. At that moment he didn't recognize him. He thought he was a nobody criticizing the heroes to defend the blonde who had tried to save him. That same night he checked the news. He saw his incident on television. The strangest thing was that the media didn't focus on All Might's rescue, but on the words the boy had said. It was at that moment that he discovered that apparently the boy who criticized the heroes that day was actually the prince of another world. Apparently that bastard's opinion had weight in the news, since the news criticized the heroes on the scene, constantly repeating one of the phrases that the boy had said and that many took seriously. "I believe that a true hero must earn his title with actions. The fact that anyone can obtain that title makes possessing it irrelevant." For some reason people took his words seriously. Seeing that bastard who caught everyone's attention here, in the best hero academy in Japan, made Bakugo's blood boil with anger. "1tsk, damn you Rechon!" Bakugo complained about the prince angrily. The group at the entrance ignored Bakugo's angry state, not paying the slightest attention to the ash blonde. "Hey! Onia!" really annoying female voice yelled from the entrance. The group of teenagers turned their gaze to see the source of the voice, noticing an annoyed girl pointing at the freckled man with her finger. "It's you!" The girl shouted angrily at the freckled man. The prince turned his gaze to the door to see the person who was pointing at him. He noticed her blonde hair, her blue eyes and her large glasses. Despite having passed a little more than 2 months since he saw her, the freckled man easily recognized her. Shield-san, it's been a while since we've seen each other. How's it going?" The freckled man asked with a kind smile on his face. The girl seemed annoyed despite the freckled man's kindness. "Nothing like how it went for you." The girl yelled at him, surprising the freckled man with her aggressive attitude. Why didn't you tell me you were the prince of the other world when we met? I told you I have many questions about your world, but you still didn't tell me anything. After that, I tried to arrange a meeting with you, but the Japanese government didn't allow it." The girl began to complain about the freckled man. The freckled man was surprised by the girl's attitude. It contrasted completely with the kind and lively way he had been when he met her. "I apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused you." The freckled boy apologized to the girl, choosing to have a friendly relationship with his classmates. The young blonde still looked upset. She had so many questions she could have asked if she had known at that moment that the boy she went out with came from the other side. She was about to continue complaining when a new voice resonated and forced Melissa to look behind her. At the entrance behind the group, a brown-haired girl with a constant blush on her cheeks was standing. You're the girl who saved me from getting 0 points on the entrance exam." The brown-haired girl said quite animatedly. Thank you so much." The young woman thanked him. The girl turned her gaze to the brunette, momentarily calming her annoyance. "Oneohonehe" showed a smilionant worry. "That's what a hero does." The girl responded with iron conviction. "Go somewhere else and play friends." Onia voice echoed from behind the young men standing at the entrance. Everyone present turned around to see a kind of yellow sack lying on the floor. which rolled. On top of it had a human face coming out of the sack. His face could be seen with traces of a badly trimmed beard and huge dark circles. Everyone was surprised by the presence of this guy. Even the freckled one was surprised. He hadn't felt the man arrive. This is the course of heroes. The man opened a piece of the sack, took out his hand, brought it to his mouth and sucked out a jelly. Was it there? Most of the class shouted together, surprised by the man's sudden appearance. The man got up from the ground still wearing his sleeping bag. Okay, it took them 8 seconds to shut up. Time is limited, children are not rational, the man said with surprising indifference. The freckled man looked at the scruffy man with shock. Is he a teacher? Onehei looked at the man carefully. It's clear he's not a normal man, the way he appeared next to us without me noticing. I look at the man carefully, analyzing him with my eyes. It must be a hero. The members of the Shadow Unit have brought me hundreds of reports of the heroes and their particularities, but I don't remember having seen anything about a hero with his description. These were the prince's thoughts. The man stood in front of the podium, observing his class carefully. I am your tutor, Shota Aizawa, pleased to meet you. It was the man's dry introduction, after which he took his hand out of his sleeping bag, holding one of the UA sports uniforms. It's sudden, but put this on and go out to the patio, Onehei said calmly, after which he got out of his sleeping bag and walked away through the school corridors. After a few minutes, finally all the students of Class A were gathered in the courtyard of the academy, wearing their sports uniforms. A gift assessment. Several of the students shouted in surprise. In the ceremony, and the presentation, Uraraka asked, surprised by the sudden activity her teacher had given her. The teacher looked at her with indifference. If they were heroes, they don't have time for such things. The UA is free of school traditions and teachers teach accordingly. The students looked at each other, surprised by the man's words. You've been doing this since high school, haven't you? Physical tests where you can't use your gifts. The country keeps using measurements of students without gifts. It's not rational. The education minister is delaying it. The master looked at the prince. Gown, what is your throwing record? Onehei asked the freckled man distractedly. The freckled man rubbed the back of his neck with a small, calm smile. In my world we don't really do that kind of testing. Onehei explained to his teacher. The man let out an annoyed sigh and pointed to a circle painted on the ground. Stand there and throw the ball as far as you can. Do whatever you want without leaving the circle. Hurry up, show me what you got on, the man said with annoyance. The prince did as he was told and stood in the middle of the white circle painted on the ground. Then he began to activate his martial arts. 1 Martial art. Strength increase martial art. Great strength increase martial art. Herculean strength martial art. Limit breaker martial art. Greater muscularity martial art. Unleashing maximum potential 1. With each martial art he activated, his body lit up with an aura, while his arms began to swell and increase in muscle. Everyone present watched this with a close look. What he's doing is the same as the exam. No, this is different. That time he did it faster. Now, he seems stronger. What the hell is that? These were Ida's incredulous thoughts. At that moment, before the attentive gaze of everyone, the freckled man threw the ball. Due to the enormous force he used, several air waves were formed while the ball moved away. Everyone was surprised to see its enormous force, but it was not over yet. The prince extended the palm of his hand towards where the ball was and activated his magic 1 triple magic maximization. Wind impact 1 the freckled one recited. Wind impact is a level 2 magic. It was a very simple spell. It just produced a stream of wind that hit a target. The spell was not deadly. It was only used to push away an opponent who was dangerously close, but in this case, it was perfect to give the ball greater momentum. Everyone heard the freckled man's words and saw what they caused. In front of everyone, a powerful blizzard came out of the prince's hands and at an incredible speed hit the ball, sending it really far away. Everyone was shocked by what they had just seen, although one word still echoed in the minds of almost every student in Class 1A, magic. The prince said that word just before the blizzard came out. Everyone was shocked. Could the prince have used magic? Was magic real? There were too many questions at that moment. Aizawa saw the blizzard created by the prince. He was actually very interested in this. He had been informed that his student from another world was capable of using magic and something called martial arts. He saw the videos of the prince's fight with the attackers, in which he saw some really strange things that the politicians who spoke to Nezu described as magic. But this was the first time he saw this magic live, and if he had to describe it in one word it would be dangerous. How many spells and types of magic existed? They had no information, and Ainz Ooal really didn't want to find out what magic was capable of. Or worse, what would happen if a villain learned to use it? This world barely resisted quirks in its society. They didn't need magic. That would only be a huge pain in the ass for the peacekeepers, and especially for Ainz Ooal. Finally, after a few seconds, the device in Ainz Ooal's hand beeped, indicating that the ball had reached the ground. The teacher raised the device to show all the students the prince's result. Seeing it, all the students of Class 1A were really impressed. Know your limit first. It's the most rational way to base a Haroon, the man explained as he showed the screen with the freckled man's results to the rest of the class. Seeing the result on Ainz Ooal's tablet, several students from Class 1A, except for a few, gasped in surprise. 947 meters. Really? Only a blonde boy with a black streak in his hair gasped in surprise. The girl with pink skin and hair smiled with joy. What's this? It looks fun. The girl exclaimed with amusement. We can use the gift at will, it will be fun. Said a black-haired boy with 2 large bumps on his elbows. A dark aura surrounded the master. Fun. Nobody liked the tone in which the man said that word. In 3 years they'll be heroes. Can they maintain that attitude until the end? The teacher showed a dark smile. Okay. Whoever finishes last in the 8 tests will be considered untalented and will be expelled. The man sentenced severely. All the students let out a slight cry of shock and fear. Everyone was afraid, but especially a blonde girl with glasses standing behind the prince. We can do whatever we want with the students, MHA said sternly to the young people, raising his gaze, showing his dark circles and dark smile better. Welcome to the UA Heroes course. The man welcomed the students in a truly disturbing manner. The freckled boy wasn't worried. With his abilities it was unlikely that he would end up in a low place. He saw this test as an opportunity, a chance to see the quirks of his classmates and analyze them. This would undoubtedly give him data that his father would consider valuable. Will they expel the last one? But it's the first day. No, even if it isn't, this is unfair. Uraraka complained. The teacher looked at her with total indifference to her complaint. Natural disasters, accidents, and selfish villains. Calamities cannot be predicted. Japan is full of injustice. The heroes turn that situation around. Sorry if you wanted to show off to your friends after school. For the next 3 years, the UA will throw you hardship after hardship. Go beyond, plus ultra. Overcome it with what you have won, the man explained to them coldly. Okay. The demo is over, now the reality begins. The teacher said seriously. All the students gathered on a running track. At the finish line there was a kind of robot with a camera head. In the race the freckled one had to face the blonde boy who seemed familiar but he still didn't recognize. Aneto their posts. The robot announced. His ash-blonde opponent glared at him angrily. Hey, idiot prince. The freckled man turned his gaze to see his companion. Don't get too carried away by throwing the ball far. I'll destroy you now. The boy said with intense hostility. The prince was confused, because this guy was insulting him. He didn't remember having done anything to him that merited that level of hostility. He simply decided to ignore him and activate his martial arts. 1 Martial art. Speed boost martial art. Greater speed boost martial art. Swift step martial art. Quick step martial art. Light step martial art. Maximum acceleration 1. Bakugo watched the freckled man activate his martial arts. Onehei's doing the same shit as in ball throwing. Onehei carefully observed the auras that constantly surrounded the green-haired man. What the hell is that? Onehei asked himself mentally. Ready, Runon the robot ad. With the starting mark both young men began to run. The young ash-blonde man stretched his arms back and shouted on explosive speed. Onehei uses the blasts from his hands to propel himself forward. A very practical use of his gift from the freckled man's point of view. Bakugo had a smile on his face. It was impossible for that extra to overcome the boost his explosions gave him. His smile quickly disappeared when the freckled man ran past him and in an instant surpassed him. Seeing this, the smile that was previously on Bakugo's face was replaced by a grimace of anger and hatred. 2.67 seconds. The machine announced the moment the prince passed in front of Idon. 4.13 seconds. The machine said as Bakugo crossed the finish line. Upon reaching the finish line, they both stopped for a moment, then Bakugo fixed his gaze on the green-haired boy. One damn extra, who does he think he is? Is he trying to beat me? There are still 7 tests left. I won't let that bastard beat me. These were the furious thoughts of the ash blonde. The next test was grip strength. Each student was given a special device to squeeze, which would tell them how many pounds their grip was. One incredible, 540 kilos. Are you a gorilla? An octopus? One said the boy with the bumps on his elbows when he saw the result of the white-haired boy with several arms. The freckled man ignored the black-haired man's comment and looked at his own mark. He had once again used martial arts to increase his strength. 386 kilos, not Badonehe commented to himself. The next test was the long jump. The prince used several speed-based martial arts to gain a good boost and run, which allowed him to have a good distance, which was above average for his class, although unfortunately it was not the best. The next test was the side jumps. The freckled one used again several speed-based martial arts to move quickly to the sides and do as many side jumps as he could, although he could not beat a dwarf who had placed several spheres next to him and had used them to bounce from one side to the other quickly. Then the ball throwing continued. It had been used as a demonstration, so Aizawa already had his result, so he simply stayed watching his other teammates. It was impressive when he saw Uraraka throw the ball and get hell as a result. He doubted it was a strength quirk, since if it was it would have caused some kind of change in the environment when thrown with great force. From what he saw, whatever the girl did prevented the ball from falling to the ground. Maybe it was something that gave her some control over gravity. After she followed the blonde boy from before, he threw the ball with an explosion that came out of his hands. It seemed that it gave it a powerful boost. Then the teacher showed her his result on 705 Medersenehe announced the teacher's phone number. 1 Hey. Only 705 Mederson. The ash blonde man was enraged by his result, glaring at his master. 1 Let me throw again Onehe asked his teacher. He didn't want his result to be lower than that of the green-haired prince. 1 Only 1 throw per person. Return to the Lineon. His teacher answered him curtly. The ash blonde boy had a clearly annoyed face, but he didn't insist again. He simply returned to the group while showing a look of hatred to the freckled boy. The green-haired boy didn't understand why the boy was so upset with him, but if he was honest, he really wasn't interested. He ignored the blonde's death glare and returned his attention to the throws. It was Melissa Shield's turn. The prince had noticed her from the beginning. In none of the tests had she shown any signs of activating a quirk. In fact, it seemed that he hadn't even bothered to use it. Really, at no time had he asked the girl what her quirk was, and he was very curious to find out. He noticed the girl's attitude. She looked nervous, scared and insecure. He wasn't sure. Suddenly she put on a determined face. Maybe she had finally decided to use her peculiarity. The prince paid special attention to this. If the girl had avoided using it, she probably had some reason that could be interesting. 1 It doesn't look good for Shield-san if he continues like this. 1 The freckled man commented aloud. 1 Yes, from what I saw in the exam, his power has a severe blow to his body after use. 1 Iida explained to the prince. 1 Oh really? 1 The freckled one Askidon. I don't remember seeing Shield-san in the exam, Onehe said to Iida. The young man with glasses rubbed the back of his neck in embarrassment. 1 I didn't really pass the recommended exam, so I took the normal exam. That's when I saw Shield-san's quirk, Onehe explained to the prince. 1 I see. 1 The prince told him. The young blonde began her test. She pushed her arm back and prepared to throw the ball, while activating her quirk. Then she threw it. 132 Mederson Master Aizawa's device announced. 1 But if I tried to use it, 1 The young blonde said in shock. Suddenly a voice resounded behind the students of Class A, so they all turned to see him, bumping into their teacher. 1 Boryudanon the teacher told him coldly as his peculiar scarf began to float around him. 1 The non-examination wasn't rational enough. They accepted someone like you, Onehe told the girl sternly. 1 Did you erase my gift? 1 The surprised blonde girl asked. The prince's eyes were wide open. The only consciousness he had left was used to avoid opening his mouth in surprise. That guy could erase gifts. His father has always told him that an intelligent person should always have a way to nullify the power of their adversary. Without a doubt, the power to nullify power would be something that his father would consider extremely valuable. What should he do? Kidnap him? No, that could attract unwanted attention and eventually uncover his entire operation. Maybe kidnapping wouldn't be necessary, they just needed to obtain DNA samples, and hopefully that would be enough for the kingdom's researchers to create a way to erase gifts temporarily or permanently. But for now, he would save kidnapping his professor as a last resort. Later, he would have to talk to the shadow unit. The young blonde looked closely at the yellow glasses that could be seen on the man's neck now that the scarf was no longer covering them. Those glasses. I get it. You can erase other people's gifts just by looking at them, the eraser hero, Eraserhead. The girl exclaimed as she realized the identity of her teacher. The prince recorded in his mind every bit of information the blonde had dropped. Unknowingly, the girl had just given him a gold mine. Eraserhead. I don't know him. Said the boy with the bumps on his elbows. I heard about him. He's an underground Haroon, said the pink girl. The teacher ignored his student's rant, keeping his attention fixed on the blonde girl. From what I see, you don't control your gift, do you? Are you trying to hurt yourself again and have others save you? The man asked with extreme indifference and annoyance in his voice. The girl seemed considerably nervous. I didn't mean to. The girl said between stutters. Suddenly Aizawa's bandages stretched towards Melissa, trapping her and bringing her closer to Eraserhead, who looked at Melissa with clear annoyance on his face. Whatever your intention is, that's what will happen in the end. Melissa gasped in fear at the intimidating pro-hero. In the past, there was an overzealous hero who saved more than 1,000 people by himself and created a legend. Even if you are equally reckless, you will end up being useless after saving one person. Onehe sharpened his gaze on the girl, releasing an even more intimidating aura. Melissa shield, with your power, you cannot become a hero. After saying those cold words, he deactivated his quirk and readjusted his scarf to its place on his neck. I gave you back your gift, you can cast one more time, hurry up and finish this. After saying this, Aizawa retired to his place and waited for the girl to make her throw. The blonde returned to the circle and watched the ball for a while, probably thinking about what to do. No matter what she decides, if she doesn't use her quirk she'll lose her only chance of not finishing last, and if she uses it her arm will break and she won't be able to continue. In any case I'll expel her. I can't believe that someone like her was actually able to enter on. These were the cold thoughts of the professional hero. The freckled boy watched the girl's actions very closely. If he was previously interested in knowing her quirk, now his intrigue had increased even more. What would the girl's quirk be like for the professor to say that? In his mind, he imagined the possibilities, but based on what he heard, it's likely something very interesting and powerful at the same time. Hopefully, it would be something good enough to catch her father's attention. Suddenly Shield threw the ball, and at the last moment he activated one for all on the tip of his finger, giving a final push to the ball. When he threw it, a powerful current of wind appeared, making some students retreat, while the prince remained still watching the scene with emotion. So much strength only in his finger, even for the standards of the Sorcerer Kingdom, that was something quite interesting. Then everyone fixed their eyes on Melissa, who had her fist raised to the height of her head, with a smile that hid a strong pain. The freckled man immediately noticed the girl's finger, which was stained red and most likely broken. So much physical strength in just his finger, it's really impressive. Although, when the freckled man looked at the young blonde's broken finger, it seems that using so much power causes a fracture in his body. I need to investigate more about this. These were the thoughts of the freckled prince. The girl stood upright while holding the hand with the broken finger. She showed her teacher a smile that tried, with little success, to hide the intense pain the girl felt. Senseion, when called, the teacher looked up from the device. I can still move, the young woman said. The teacher showed a terrifying but excited smile when he saw what the girl had done. This girl alone, the scruffy man said with emotion. Finally the physical tests ended. All the students gathered around Aizawa with the intention of seeing their results. It would be a waste of time to show you your results one at a time. Soon the device's screen showed a holographic projection of the entire class's results. Each one see where he is, the teacher said with disinterest. Everyone looked at their position. The leaderboard was arranged according to the position each person had achieved based on the average of their results. 1 degree Izuku Ooal Gown. 2 degrees Momo Yaoyorozu. 3 degrees Shoto Todoroki. 4 degrees Katsuki Bakugo. 5 degrees the Feast of Tenya. 6 degrees Fumikage Tokiyami. 7 degrees Mezu Shoji. 8 degrees Mashirao Ojiro. 9 degrees Eijiro Kirishima. 10 degrees Mina Ashido. 11 degrees Ochako Uraraka. 12 degrees Koji Koda. 13 degrees Rikido Sato. 14 degrees Suyu Asui. 15 degrees Yuga Aoyama. 16 degrees Hechicero. 17 degrees Electricity. 18 degrees Kyoka Juro. 19 degrees Toru Hagakuri. 20 degrees Minoru Mineta. 21 degrees Melissa Shield. Upon seeing the results, several students began to make comments, most of them reassuring at not having finished last. One thanked Godon, the pink girl said with a sigh. The freckled man looked at his results carefully. One first Plationehe commented to himself with a proud smile. One not Bodonehe finally said. One I think second place isn't so bad. One Momo said, though from the slight twitch of irritation in her eyebrow, a proper observer could tell the jealousy the girl felt. But among all those present there was a student covered by a dense aura of depression. While looking at the ground on lastly, I tried hard and still came in last place. One the young American woman exclaimed sadly. One yeah, by the way, the expulsion thing was a lie. One the teacher said indifferently, leaving all his students in shock. Only a rational lie to make them use their full potential. One I explain as if threatening to expel a class member on the first day of school is no big deal. One I was tricked, even though it was meant to motivate us. I feel disappointed that the Best Hero Academy uses that kind of deceptive tactics. One Iida exclaimed in annoyance. One it was pretty obvious, and Momo said loudly, drawing the attention of her companions. One was I the only one who noticed? Onehe asked his surprised companions. The teacher observed the American kneeling on the floor, who despite her broken finger, had a huge smile of happiness at the news of not being expelled. One by the way, Shield, go to recovery girl to have your finger healed. One the teacher ordered the girl. The freckled boy listened to the teacher's words, looking again at the girl's broken finger. It seemed like a simple fracture. His classmate had tried hard and had narrowly escaped expulsion, and according to his father, someone who tries hard should be rewarded. He slowly began to walk towards Melissa, who was already close to him. One Shield-san, let me help you. One the freckled man said to him kindly. The girl looked at him with intrigue. One do you want to join me? One the girl asked, unsure of what the prince meant by accompanying her. In an unexpected action, Izuku took the hand that had Melissa's broken finger with both hands, and as he did so, a blush and a look of surprise appeared on Melissa's face. The freckled man wasn't a healer and only had a very limited number of healing spells, but since it was just a broken finger, he should be able to heal it properly with one of the few healing spells he had access to. One heal. One the prince recited the spell. Instantly a green light appeared in the prince's hands. The light faded slightly until it finally showed Melissa's finger completely healed. All the students including Aizawa saw this with enormous impression. Was this the power of magic? Without a doubt the power of magic and its applications are a power that must be taken into account. To be continued. If you have watched till end, drop purple hearts in comments so I can know. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.